Okay, everyone, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Committee of the Whole meeting for April 11th, 2012. Before we proceed with a roll call, I would ask that we all take a moment to remember Josiah Grant, grade 12 student from Smith Falls District High School. So I ask you to all rise and reflect on the young man's life. All right, thank you, everyone. Director?
Trustee Buckland. Present. Trustee Kirkner.
Present.
Trustee Garrow.
Present.
Trustee McPherson.
Present.
Trustee McAllister.
Present.
Vice Chair McDonald.
Present.
Vice Chair McMillan.
Present.
Trustee McCray.
Present.
Chair Petersburg.
Present.
Trustee Richard.
Present.
Trustee Swan.
Present.
Our student trustee Jacob Powell.
Present. Thank you, Director. Before we proceed with the approval of the agenda, I would just like to recognize everyone for wearing pink on Day of Pink. Today is Day of Pink. It's an international day against bullying, discrimination, and homophobia and transphobia in our schools and communities. And I want to thank everyone for participating tonight. John, Trustee McAllister, you have something you wish to add?
I just wanted to say, Chair, that we were reminded to wear pink, and my limited wardrobe didn't have any pink, frankly. So as I was reading the CUPE newsletter, there was an article here entitled "Bullying is Not Part of Growing Up," and part of their campaign is a Partners Against Bullying, and they have the Pink Scarf campaign to recognize that. So I asked if I could have one for tonight, and they sent over 11. So that's why you have them at your places.
Thank you. The agenda, I'd like to suggest that we, for the benefit of one of our trustees, to move the budget item to our first item. Is there any opposition to changing the agenda? I have a motion to approve the agenda. Trustee Richards, Trustee McPherson, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Move now to private session. We have not completed private session this evening. We reported on it the next meeting. Approval of minutes. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to approve the minutes. Trustee Kirkner, Trustee Garrow, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. At some point, I'm going to ask Lisa to try this when we do a vote, to have her try the electronic. We're trying to figure out whether we can isolate the e-voting as our problem or a software problem. But I'll wait for a bit. Okay. It's that time of the year, folks, when we turn our mind to a hard look at the budget. Recently we had the grants for students' needs issued following the provincial budget, and our crack team of financial experts have been poring over it, and Superintendent of Business Rick Gales will be giving us an overview of the grants. Rick, the floor is yours. It's good to see that you're working with two hands tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Good evening. So now the anticipated GSN has been released, and this evening, with the help of Michael, Nancy, and the superintendents around the table, we're going to review the ministry's presentation of the grants. It's still early. We have some of the information. We don't have the detailed forms as yet. We do have the technical paper. It was received at about 4 o'clock Thursday, last Thursday, just before Good Friday. And so, of course, Michael spent his weekend reading it, as did I. And Nancy, I'm sure, did as well. And so we still have a number of questions, and I think we'll, as we go through this, we'll be able to have some discussions. I think that in general terms, the GSN attempts to do a number of things. Firstly, it tries to flatten out the growth in education spending, primarily through labor adjustments. It also attempts to reduce things before people. It attempts to realign funding in specific areas, facilities, labor. They continue to want to reduce funding for administration and governments. They want to honor the commitments they've made in the previous PDT agreement from 4 years ago that carry into this year, the 5th year. They're going to continue the implementation of the full-day kindergarten. And they also are setting the stage for further reductions over the next 3 years, primarily and particularly in 2013-14 and 14-15. Some of the suggestions include potential school board amalgamations. They want to look at underutilized schools in urban areas and the amount that they're being funded. They're looking at student transportation expenses. They want to cap the number of secondary school credits at 34 as opposed to 30. They want to address collective agreement costs. They want to address sick day usage and related costs, pension costs. They are starting with reducing curriculum specialists, PD amounts, and funding for PD and computers. And they are realigning spending in EPO grants, facilities, and capital. And that is a very, very bold agenda. So we'll have to see now some of the impact of that. So obviously, they want to limit the growth in spending. And they focused on compensation because they realize that that makes up 50% of the spending. They've examined the Drummond report recommendations, and they're going to move forward on a number of these. The report on GSN PDT discussions will continue as they move forward, but essentially they have frozen the salary amounts in the GSN and reduced the benefit amounts because of the position they're taking on sick days and pension costs and retirement gratuities. And you can see that this is the impact of the funding for on a per student basis from 2002-03 to 2012-13, and you'll notice the font. They've taken our presentation font on this one, but essentially you can see that there has been significant growth in education spending over the last 10 years. A lot of that has been in terms of jobs and salary levels, and you can see on a per student basis the funding has increased by 55% over the last 10 years, and it's been significant. There's no question about the last period of time and the increased spending in education. They are honoring the PDT agreements that they negotiated 4 years ago, and these are some of the outcomes. They are increasing the the prep time for elementary teachers by an additional 10 minutes. It'll be up to 240 minutes in the fall, and that involves hiring extra teachers and providing extra support. There is additional reduction in class size for grades 4 to 8 and down to 24.5 teachers to 24.5 students to 1 teacher rather. There's additional funding for grade 7 and 8 student success for literacy and numeracy teachers, and there is additional program support in secondary programming, which will provide additional teachers. So they're looking at basically 1,275 additional teaching jobs coming from the previous set of negotiations before they move forward. They're also honoring their commitment to the OMERS non-teaching retirement fund. Pardon me. They're realigning the school operations. What they've recognized is that the benchmarks have not changed since around 2002 in the facilities area, and so they're realigning the benchmarks to recognize a number of different things. The new schools that have been created, the age of the schools, the growth in some of the expenditures around electricity and other operating costs, and so they're realigning the funding as a result of those benchmark changes. They're also recognizing that the supplementary area factor is a benchmark that needs to change, and they're reviewing that as well, and they have a new formula in place. They talk about removing the program enhancement grant, and as you remember, the program enhancement grant was money that was used to fund school budgets and supported music, art, physical education, outdoor education. They have taken this out of the GSN, and they're going to be putting it into an EPO grant for outdoor education, but there has not been any information released on that yet. Excuse me. Sorry. The proposal in terms of the sick leave and retirement gratuity is to fund 6 sick days at 100% and 24 weeks at 2/3, 66%, I believe, and to freeze the retirement gratuities as of August 31st, 2012. There's more information coming, and there will be more calculations and meetings as we go forward to understand exactly their calculations and how they plan to move forward on this. They're continuing to update the demographic portion of the Learning Opportunities Grant as it relates to English as a second language. The prior formula was based on census data from the 90s, and they're moving into much more recent census data, which means that it's reallocating funding from major urban centers into more centers. They're continuing to change the geographic circumstances grant and move it toward the supported schools allocation as they had started that in 2010, 2011. They've announced $350 million for major capital funding, and they are looking for boards to supply a plan by the end of May for schools that would be open for 2015-16, and they're also putting money into school renewal and portable leases. They're continuing to fund and stay on track with their 4th and 5th year of full-day kindergarten. The operating costs in 12-13 plus the new capital for 13-14 released this year as well, and that would be the 5th year. In order to address some of the savings measures, again, they are reducing funding to school board administration and governance. And the line they are using to reduce is the directors and superintendent's lines. They have made the savings measure they introduced last year, or the year before rather, in classroom computers. They are going to make that permanent. And so they've reduced that for until somebody puts it back, I suppose. Professional development has been reduced and made permanent as well. And they are continuing to reduce transportation expenditures by 1% per year. The classroom consultants line, our preliminary calculations by Michael would indicate that that's going to reduce that line for us by $256,000 between our current year and next year. So in terms of the longer term savings, they are promising no new dollars in the GSN for salaries, and no dollars for any movement on the grid. Again, the underused school strategy in urban centers, the 4-year high school program. They want to reduce the number of and the opportunity to get further credits and freeze that at 34 credits. And they want to examine the possibility of further school board amalgamations. Again, the board admin and governance allocation reduction. They have sent out a new BPS expense directive, and I haven't honestly taken a look at that, so I can't comment on that. They have provided the following dates for submission of financial and capital reports: May 31st for capital priorities, June 29th for board estimates, and November and December. Those are fairly normal dates. They have also announced a major portion of their EPO grants, Education Program Other, which are programs that they fund outside of the GSN. So specific priorities that the ministry has focused on, and they will be, they have rolled out about 2/3 of that funding and announced it, but there's still more to come. They also announced at the same time the requirement for transportation consortiums to tender for operator contracts for 2013-14. And there is a copy of the report that the committee wrote, and also the statement from the chair. There is another report on supply chain expenses, the implementation guide, and reporting requirements for employee future benefits, gratuities, and as I said, there'll be a discussion on that this Thursday. In terms of the report we sent you, this is a copy of the EPO grants, the Education Program Grants Other, that was announced at the same time. So an additional $1.6 million outside of the GSN. This is the ministry estimate of the GSN changes, and as you can see, overall we expect a decrease in the area of 1.9%. Essentially, our enrollment overall will go down next year by 2.6%, but almost all of that is in the secondary panel, and so we're expecting to see a decrease in secondary enrollment of almost 6%, and pretty well flat in elementary. And that translates into a funding decrease with the other changes they've announced of 1.9% for next year. 2013-14, 2014-15 will be significantly higher decreases than that, primarily due to the changes that they're proposing in the salary and benefits areas. You can see where the funding has changed, where it's gone up a little bit and where it's gone down on this slide. Now, I hadn't planned to go through that in detail unless trustees wish. I leave it up to your discretion, Mr. Chair, how you want to direct the questions and discussions. We've provided the normal slides for projected funding, updated. You know these slides from previous presentations, so I won't dwell on those. There continue to be carry forward issues from 11-12 directed at board offices where there is a 10% reduction in office expenditures, and again a reduction in superintendent directors benchmarks, funding benchmarks.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent of Business Gales. Just for clarification, this was ministry language
This is all.
slides,
This is the
which is
ministry
why
slides,
it says
yes.
savings and not cuts.
This is all the ministry presentation. Though this is their slide deck.
'Cause we didn't save anything. Savings makes it sound positive. Trustees, comments, questions? Trustee Buckland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just asked the treasurer to look at the revenue comparison sheet. I'm interested in the line cost adjustment, teacher qualification and experience, which represents a 7.7% decrease you've got here. Now, is that because you're at zero, or what have they cut here? Could you explain that one, please?
Well, I'm going to let Michael jump in when I get into trouble. But essentially, it's up on the screen.
This is the new one? All right.
Essentially, the ministry has frozen the salaries. They've frozen the grid. They expect that with no one moving on the grid, because they've asked for a freeze of motion on the grid, of people's movement on the grid, that there will not be a need to supplement the difference between the average salary and what people and what people earn. Because as you recall, that grant is to recognize the difference between the average cost and the board's actual cost. So if they freeze movement on the grid, then there is a opportunity to reduce the cost adjustment and teacher qualification experience grant.
So I can follow that up, and its standard or rule of thumb is about 8% increase just for qualifications and experience.
Well, I think it's really going to depend on each board is going to have a different experience that way. And the reason is that we've had a declining enrollment for a number of years now. Boards that are stable or have had enrollment growth would have a different experience on their grid. Basically, a new teacher will spend 10, 11 years on the grid moving up, and then sort of 20 years after that at the top of the grid, moving from left to right as they accumulate degrees and more higher qualifications.
Thank you.
Trustee McPherson?
Many of the first numbers that you threw at us were provincial benchmarks. They talked about 1,275 new teachers. That's obviously
Yes.
spread across, 72 boards in Ontario?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this is a ministry slide deck. We haven't got the data and the forms completed yet to give you details on our own, what's
Yeah,
going to
so
be
you're
our own experience.
Basically still working through what impact it's actually going to have on us.
That's
But
correct.
This is kind of like the thin edge of the wedge. Is that this year's going to be a little rough, but next year and the following year will be even more difficult.
They will be a greater challenge.
Okay.
But forewarned is forearmed, so.
What was that again? Trustee Kirkner?
Through you, Chair, a question about the consortium and tendering contracts for 2013 and 2014. What small amount that I've read so far on that particular document that was put out by the task force to the ministry, is it a plan of the government to force school boards to go with the larger companies in order to have a better cost for the transportation of the students? Is our consortium going to be required to do that?
Our consortium will be required to tender, put out a request for quotation for operation of its bus routes. Exactly how that is all going to work out has not been determined yet. Experience in other boards has seen some large operators gaining and some large operators losing completely. There has been a mix, and it would be very difficult to say exactly what's going to happen as we go forward. The Transportation Consortium is now working through the planning stages for that process, and will be bringing to the governance committee of the Transportation Consortium in the next short while details of the plan, and meeting with the consultants who will be helping and leading that process.
It has been, though, I can add, has been the direction from both boards through the governance committee to the administration of STIO that we do whatever we can in order to support having a large, healthy, vibrant supplier of bus services. So trying to do whatever we can to ensure that we have a large number of suppliers and follow the rules. So that's the direction we're taking. And our understanding is, and I'm speaking on the political side, is that we've been given some indication that there is the provisions inside the rules for us to do that. So we're going to try to do that as much as we can.
Good.
Trustee McAllister?
I have several questions, but one with regard to the Learning Opportunities Grant. You show it as an increase for us of 12.4%, or whatever,
12.4%.
12.4%?
Yeah, that is, it would appear that that's for primarily directed at grade 7 and 8 opportunities. And if you go to the technical paper, you will see a new amount in there. and really, some of this is quite new to us as well. So I'm going to have to ask some of my education colleagues whether they're aware of what the plans are yet or not. And
Just a supplementary.
Well, do you have anything to add, Superintendent Carswell, or?
anything new to,
It's okay to say no at this point.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. How many questions do you have, Trustee McAllister?
3 or 4.
Okay.
I can take my time.
Yeah, we'll do another one and then I'll see.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Back to the Learning Opportunities Grant. By what figure was it? What happened to that in the budget? Was it increased or decreased?
across the province?
Yes.
I don't have that number in front of me, but I can get it for you shortly. It wouldn't take very long.
Go ahead. They're short questions, so this is good.
I assume, am I right in assuming that the decreases due to the Ontario budget will be reflected in our budget?
I would expect that to be the case. If you look at, well, let's look at the Pupil Foundation grant. That is primarily due to declining enrollment. So that means fewer teachers in front of kids. It also means that there's less money available for benefits as determined by the ministry because they have frozen all movement on the salary grid, they have frozen the salaries, and they have reduced the number of sick days, which they estimate at having a value of 0.7%, I think. So all of those freezes are going to come through. Language grant, for example, would be mostly enrollment decline. You can see the program in what the heck is that called? Enhancement grant has been completely taken out. It's to be added in an EPO grant, but we haven't seen the details of that yet. So each of those lines has its own sort of story about it, and they will have to be reflected in the budget.
Last one?
If we take a look at the program enhancement grant, it has been discontinued for a saving of, or a cut of $20 million. And it's been redirected to outdoor ed through education program, other grants. What impact will that have on Upper Canada?
Well,
What will we have to stop doing that we are doing now?
well, we're going to, you know, if we're going to, we used to use that grant to fund the $300,000 of arts funding that the board had directed. We also used that funding to fund school budgets. So there'll have to be some approach in terms of how we continue to do that in the future. And so that means that something will have to give somewhere else if we continue to maintain that level of support at the school. This is sort of a zero sum. If you take from one, you have to take it from another in order to, there is, you know, if it comes out of the school budgets, then we have to take it for somewhere else to top up those school budgets.
In general, though, it's early yet to know exactly what the ramifications will be. Yeah. I'll come back to you. Trustee McCrae.
Through your chair, a lot of the same questions I was going to ask have already been asked by Trustee McAllister. But I guess as I look at this and looking ahead, I can see some implications on our strategic plan, that's for sure. And one of them is with the program enhancement grant. That's just one I can think of right away. When they come out with the grants for student needs, I wonder, do they also send the rationales or the reasons for some of the decisions they make regarding these?
Well, I think that, you know, what you read in the media is what I see in the media and seems to be their rationale. Drummond, I mean, they've been building to this point for a while in terms of the Drummond report and looking for savings and trying to flatten out the growth in the cost of education. But also they want to maintain, according to their reports, the momentum that has been gained in terms of achievement, and they want to maintain the rolling out of the full-day kindergarten. So they're being quite targeted in what they want and what they see and how they want to roll it out. And I think that this presentation shows precisely what they have in mind, flattening out, attacking the growth of salaries, but trying to maintain the programs and the outcome for kids.
If I may just say one other thing, I just have a hard time understanding why, when the program enhancement grant provided support to enhance the educational opportunity that we provide for our students, it looks to me, by looking at this, that the funding will be used to support outdoor education programs.
Well, I don't know how much funding we'll see in outdoor education, but it would appear, and that would be consistent, that they would like to cut things before people. And so they're attacking, if you like, they're reducing support to tangible items rather than people.
On the program enhancement grant, part of the rationale could be that when they put stuff into the EPO grant, that's often sweatered, targeted political announcements, and what this really represents is a grab in flexibility for boards to assign that amount to board-driven directives. Would that not, is that not some of the,
Fairly accurate, yes.
Okay,
okay?
so good, okay.
So really, they're moving it out of our ability to fund our multi-year plans that we're legally bound to have and to fund their multi-year plan.
In other words, it might give us more flexibility to.
It's not going to give us flexibility. It's taking flexibility away.
Away.
It has the, no, I should be careful. It has the potential to, that often the money that's put through the educational grants that come off the budget or outside of the GSNs are sweatered. So they'll say, you know, there's $2 million for all the boards and you have to spend it on library books or something, or, you know, to alleviate whatever. Yeah. Okay, Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions on this slide in particular. And Trustee McAllister started upon it and talked about the People Foundation piece and a couple others. There were four in particular that I wanted to pay attention to. People Foundation was one. The cost adjustment, teacher qualification experience, special education, and then the program enhancement grants. I think you've handled the People Foundation program enhancements. Clarify cost adjustment, teacher qualification. That has everything to do with the grid freeze that's being applied. Would that be my guess on that? And going back to Trustee McAllister, yes. When he asked the question, what does that do for us? I want to know the same answer from a special education standpoint. What impact does that have on Upper Canada when there is 1.2 million removed from special education?
Well, that comes about due to declining enrollment in part, but also in part because of the freeze on salary. So it means less money in special education. It means fewer special education resources, primarily human resources. There is also a portion of that which is equipment-based, I believe. And exactly how that gets divided up, we've yet to see. But when we get the forms and are able to complete those calculations, we'll be able to give you a finer answer to that question.
Just before I go back to you, maybe one of the breakouts that you can do when you have the greater details is in the decrease, separate that out once again and show us what the decreases are due to declining enrollment and what is actually decreased due to the budget being changed. If that's not too onerous, that might be helpful. Trustee McDonald, do you have an additional question?
Yeah, just two more issues, and I'm trying to make sure I understand the terminology that the ministry used. I think they use, is it cost savings? Is that, I think that's the terminology, correct?
That's right.
From our standpoint, and then from an education standpoint, when they say cost savings, and we can look at a number of different areas, potentially that's a cost savings to the budget, but what's the cost impact on the education, the destination for kids in our system by removing some of those dollars? I know you can't answer that today, but I'm hopeful that when we do look at and analyze the budget, that we have some of those, and they're assumptions to some degree for us to speculate on, but we have an idea of what the impact is when you remove some of these issues or you freeze them. If it's directly related to reduction in students, that's one thing. But when you freeze it, there is a negative impact to the users, the end users. And so what impact is that within our student population when we have those freezes? And I think that's the piece that we need to make sure that we communicate back somehow, whether it falls on deaf ears or not, but we need to be prepared to look at those types of things. The last area that I wanted to go into, and the slide talks about an additional 10 minutes for teacher prep time. So 240 minutes total for teacher prep time. I guess help me with the timeline. How much has this increased by over the last few years?
I think it's been 10 minutes a year for 5 years, so it's gone up, I think, 50 minutes. Is that a week? Is that correct, Superintendent? It's been now at 240 That's the end of the PDT agreement. So that's been 10 minutes a year for 5 years now.
That's half a day's work for most people that they're using for prep time. So that having that prep time means more teachers because they're out of the classroom, so we need to have more teachers as a result of that. The class cap is another issue, so we're, as a result, we're hiring more teachers because of the class cap. Do we have any evidence that says more prep time or smaller class sizes have increased student achievement?
I'm going to leave that up to-
Director?
That's a very loaded question. The fact is there's all kinds of studies out that say the smaller the class size, the better the engagement levels. And then who's ever argued that if you give more prep time, be more prepared to work for your kids and provide them with better lessons. I think the piece here is at the table, if you're looking for an answer to the question, it's going to take some really, really in-depth research, and it's going to take a provincial type of study that would be taken by a noisy type of thing. But it is, obviously Rick's not the educator. Rick keeps our books and our numbers straight. The interesting piece about that one is that it's a very, very loaded question. I would say from my perspective, smaller class sizes have helped kids, particularly with special needs. Is there the most optimum number? Probably. I think that could be found. Are we going to find it tonight for you now?
And I wasn't expecting an answer, but I think that needs to be part of the journey that we look at whenever we're trying to respond to some of these things and be prepared. I think hiring more people isn't necessarily the answer sometimes.
Okay, good. You want to respond, and then I'm going to
May I
next
say,
person.
Trustee McDonald, I think that's the type of question that has to be asked in open session that would ask OBSPA to begin that type of study. I would say let's strike a important, probably multi-year study that would get at the detail of your question.
Right. Assumption is the course that was done in order to improve student achievement and not to address working conditions issues too, right? I mean, that's...
Yes.
Trustee Karkner.
Mine's more a comment than a question. I know that Superintendent Gales has no control over what the government is saying, but I'm hoping that if he has any discussions with or if any of our group has discussions with ministry personnel, that they bring the message back that freezing gratuities, we probably saw that coming, but I'm afraid that we may lose experienced mentors and teachers that we have in our boards who may have been potential principals and vice principals. But my biggest concern really is those new teachers. If you freeze a new teacher on the grid for 2 years and not allowing any movement forward, some of those are our enthusiastic and energetic teachers and have great potential. And having worked with new teachers in the past, I've seen it. And I would not be surprised if we saw some people leaving our board and the boards across Ontario because of this freeze. They bring with them debt. They probably haven't gotten the contract in their first few years of graduating from universities and teachers college. And I'm afraid they may look elsewhere for an occupation that will help them pay their bills. So I hope the ministry is getting that message loud and clear from a lot of people that these new people have brought a lot to our boards, and it'd be a shame to lose them because of the salaries being frozen, or even no advancement on the grid. Let them have their advancement, but it's a sad day to see that coming to our boards for all teachers, but especially our new ones.
Thank you, Trustee Karkner. Trustee McAllister.
I have a question with regard to fees for learning materials and activities. Would that come under the Pupil Foundation Grant and the School Foundation Grant?
Within the Pupil Foundation Grant, there is a money to pay for learning materials and supplies in the classroom. When you use the word fees, I hear fees charged to students, but I don't think that's what you mean.
I'm really referring to whatever is encompassed in our policy that we passed at the last board meeting. So both. I guess we have a conundrum here. We are experiencing cuts in these two areas at a time whenever we are going to have to increase those areas of the budget to provide for learning materials and activities which otherwise were paid for by parents, correct? And I just hope, and the message that I've received from some of my school councils is that please don't put it back onto our shoulders in terms of fundraising.
I think that the board's policy follows the ministry's directive
Yes.
very clearly in that fees cannot be charged for the necessities of earning the credit. They are to enhance the materials that are otherwise supplied. And I think this board has always attempted to follow those rules. Our schools have. I wouldn't see us changing that because we have a policy, we have a ministry directive. I think it's going to be up to schools and school committees to have to decide if they feel that they're not being properly supported. I don't think that we've ever had a situation where we don't have schools that have not been able to handle the needs of the kids with their school budgets. If we were to look at our financial statements at year end, you will see that most schools have a surplus in their school budgets.
Okay.
I think the other key piece in this is that as we see this policy roll out, I foresee a lot of very confused parents because I think they're expecting changes that are not going to happen. Like, I don't think that other boards who've implemented this have all of a sudden no longer have an expectation that kids are going to show up with a pencil case, like those types of things. And I think that if you moved, one of the things that we're going to have to work as trustees and in our relations with our communities is sort of mitigating that misunderstanding that's going to happen. I mean, they just, it's so easy for parents to jump to the conclusion that when they see a policy and announcement, well, that means that list is never going to come home anymore. That list isn't going to come home, and parents are going to start asking, well, I want to send my kid with stuff to school, so what is it that you want me to send? What would help them? And we'll be right back to the list. So I think that to some extent, that list was created to offer parents some guidance on what to send that would be helpful. The thing that obviously the schools are going to have to deal with is the situation, well, if you have a geography lesson and it involves coloring a map, then you can't rely on the kids to bring in the pencil crayons. There has to be pencil crayons in the classroom. Like, that's going to be the trade-off. But I know parents are still going to want to know, what can I help? What can I send? So you're still going to, I think, see a list. It's going to be how the list is presented. And those parents that are confused by that, that's going to be a real challenge. I mean, it's an awkward position that we've been put in, but Director?
We also have to make sure that the teachers aren't confused, because we're still tragically with hundreds and hundreds of classrooms, and as you know, Trustee McAllister, change can be awkward and difficult in the classroom. If someone who for 23 straight years has sent home a nice little piece of paper saying, these are the type of color crayons we like, these are the type of things we like, and parents like that, say, okay, at home I want to have something that matches what Sally or Bobby or Ravi is going to be using at school. That's fair. But the fact is that we're clearly telling our principals, and we're wanting to see it in the classrooms. If it's in the classroom, it's a classroom activity, it should be open to everyone. There shouldn't be extra need to supplies, or you have to pay for that if it's in a regular classroom activity. The difficulty we'll be explaining is extracurricular or co-curricular. When you say, okay, now we're going to take this a step further, who would like to be on the band? That's a total different thing when the band's going to work after school or before school, or they're going to work on Saturdays. That is a decision by a parent to say, I want a little extra in the co-curricular or the extracurricular. I think we're going to be hit, one of the hardest areas we're going to be hit, and I don't prolong this one, trust me, but I think it's going to be the area of a busing of our school and sports teams. We used to have a slush fund that was created for that with our cafeterias and our Coca-Cola or our Pepsi machines and so forth. We're able to take that money in our non-board funds and now our principals are telling me we're broke. We're probably going to be taking from this, or be writing letters home saying, or here's a fee to play basketball this year, which is the type of, and we're going to have to spend some time thinking about that. As I understand across the province, this is a major issue. But what we, as the chair is explained very, very well, we have to communicate more effectively, saying, in the classroom, we look after that. Outside of the classroom, parents you look after. Now, that may sound very, very simple, and we have parents who want to do that. Okay, that's okay, I like that. Have the pencil crayons there. I'd like to know if it's this type of pencil crayons at home when Sally, Bobby, Reggie does their homework. I want them to have a similar type of issue. That will be the piece we have to communicate more effectively on. And I think the government has told us that's the communication plan you have to have.
It's just, I'm cautious that we're running this into a different, but I think that just before we leave it, just to highlight some of the confusion, I think things that the budget's going to have to help our parents. This is a good time for us to discuss it, and as we relate to our communities, to have them work through thinking about it, and our schools. But at one of my local meetings, it was brought to my attention that there was a school trip where they rented a theater to watch the Hunger Games. They were studying the Hunger Games in class. There was a fee for the trip. I know this personally. And, you know, the question came up, well, what happens to an event like this next year? Well, if you needed to attend, I think this would be sort of the logic, right? And you can correct me. But if attending this event was necessary in order to complete the curriculum item, then the school's got to pay.
Yes.
Yes.
If it is purely extracurricular to enhance the school, the child's experience, then it is something that would be appropriate for schools to levy a fee for. However, no child should not attend because they couldn't afford the fee. That caveat's always in there, but I think it's going to be one of those things that on all our meetings we're going to have to touch on. Anyway, do you have any further questions, Trustee McAllister?
Just a comment on what you said, because I think I agree with you. There are two sets of conversations that we need to have, one with our staff and one which we need to frame with our parent councils. And we only have 2 months left in which to do it. And I suggest that conversation begin very shortly.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes to us too to lead that conversation. Okay, I don't have anybody left on my speakers list. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? I'll go to Trustee McCray. Just before I do, we will have, I would think, next meeting, committee of the whole, we should have sort of a draft of what you're thinking about. Would that be about right?
Hopefully, we'll have something in early May, but we can't guarantee it yet.
Okay.
We're
All
still
right, so
waiting
that's
for
sort of the
forms.
target.
Rick's staff is smiling.
But that means that you will, so that's good.
No, that means that I've just been.
That's fine. We will,
Deserted.
but that'll be sort of the next step, trustees, just so you understand, will be to get sort of the fleshing out and see exactly what it means, and then we can have further conversations. Trustee McCray?
Through you, Chair, just in closure too, I think that there's also we need to be looking at fundraising, because I think fees, fundraising, and this budget all tie in together. And so I think that we need to seriously be looking at that policy as well, and how we can all work together in the best interest of students.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Trustee McAllister?
It's more of a request, Chair, since we are talking about the next steps in the budget. Personally, I would like to see a much more detailed breakdown of the spending forecasts in learning opportunity grants, program enhancement grant, which is non-existent now, but the administration and governance grant, etc. I'd like to see how the administration plans on spending this money.
Typically, you have that's part of one of the packages we get, right? Is sort of a detailed
Yeah, that's generally the last
printout of the.
the June book, if you like, the June
Yeah.
brick.
So yes, we'll get that. All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Superintendent Gales, for enlightening conversation. Next, I'd like to invite Ian Carswell to introduce Mr. Lewis and Mr. Ferguson and introduce the Learning Commons update. And we have, I think, an interesting presentation, interesting in the way that it's being done, and certainly I'd like to get some feedback on the format of this report when it's completed.
Just as Terry Sims are setting up, actually our two guests tonight are, they're not going to give you a spiel, they're not going to present. Actually, the presentation is contained in a video that Terry's going to show you, which includes a number of interviews from students and teachers and principals in our school on the implementation of, on-the-ground implementation of the Learning Commons. I've asked Ron and Don to be here so that you could respond to questions that you might have as it pertains to the application of Learning Commons in their school. So just to frame this, the lens is, what does this really look like on the ground for our students? What's a day in the life in the Learning Commons like? So they will make themselves available to your questions following Terry's presentation. Director Thomas, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I was just going to give a little history to some people perhaps
Sure.
around the table who perhaps aren't as close to this as you and I were. A couple of years ago, we had a situation where some of our secondary school principals ran into difficulties with their programs and their staffing, and felt that they had to close their libraries down for part of the day or maybe certain periods during the course of the school day. It had to do with our collective agreements and how they're interpreted and so forth. We took that problem and we brought about 100 people to a meeting. Librarians, local people from all over Eastern Ontario involved in library and library-related material. We brought some business people in who, for background, worked in computers, and then we identified Tim Mills and Ron Ferguson to chair a group that would take a look at modernizing our look at how we get information and deal with information. We had approximately 10 professional librarians. We had librarians from Cornwall and Brockville. In fact, the new librarian for Brockville that was hired in Brockville is now an employee of ours, who joined our team in this particular search, and I know that they're out looking for a new librarian now for the city of Brockville as it goes on. But the fact was I was so pleased with what became a big problem at the table and in our schools became a way of doing business differently. And so we took the problem and we really went at it and tried to find a solution that made sense and made our schools even better. And I'd like to thank Ian for running with this. I know that we had our first meeting, we had approximately 100 people at Kempville, and our last meeting was just a week or so ago. And at that particular meeting, I think people said, this is really the way we have to go. So I'm looking forward to this creative way of presenting to the board. I haven't seen it as well. Thanks, Ian.
So just before you started, just to give you a little context, we, Management Council, we were looking at the way to bring this information, and we wanted trustees to have a chance to see the schools in action, but obviously that was difficult for us to go to the individual schools. We also wanted to hear the students, and we did contemplate actually bringing students and staff here. But that, we viewed that that was probably an imposition, so we thought we would ask the communication team to work with Ron and Mr. Lewis and Mr. Ferguson and come up with a report that showed the reaction and what's going on. So not during the debate, but maybe after, if you give us some feedback on how you thought that worked. And thanks to Terry for getting it together, and we'll see. If this works, we'll do it.
Learning Commons is sort of, I guess, a reinvention of the idea of a library. A library is a storehouse for books where you check out a book, read a book, look in a book. A Learning Commons is more the idea of what you would get out of traditionally a book. You can get it out of lots of other places. So you can get together, get it out of colleagues, get it out of technology, other media, and books all together all at the same time in whatever combination works best and however it works best for your learning needs.
Well, the Learning Commons is it's funny, it's not just a place, it's not just a service, it's not just a person. It's really a model. It's a shift in how we view education and the role of information in students' education today.
I think the Learning Commons concept is a good one in the sense that we have lots of different options available for the students. So we not only do we have books, but we also have the computer labs.
The Learning Commons is a safe environment for kids to come into, access technology, access our books, access teacher expertise, access our Learning Commons informationists, and have a more supportive environment in their learning. We have student success teachers such as myself. We have a learning resource teacher in our Learning Commons, and then we have our Learning Commons informationists. And those three areas of expertise really help us better support that student in their needs.
As the principal of Pakenham Public School, over the last year I've witnessed the transformation of our library to a Learning Commons. And one of the things that people kind of talk about and that they notice is the physical transformation. So what's actually happened in the space that is our Learning Commons. So as a library, we had bookshelves that were high and maybe most of the time students couldn't reach the top part of them. You had uncomfortable seating, a wall full of encyclopedias, you have unmovable furniture and no handheld devices or computers in them. In the Learning Commons, it's a pretty dramatic change because now you have movable furniture, so the space can be used for a variety of purposes. You have beanbag chairs, there's a comfortable setting for students. You have 15 computers in ours. Where the stack of encyclopedias used to be, we now have a smart board, and you have iPads and iPods, handheld devices. On the wall there's a gigantic Jungle Book mural that's very inviting. So that's a pretty dramatic transformation.
It's a one-stop shopping, if you will, for students. Not only do we have an area that's an actual computer lab that classes can use, but we also have other 20 computers that kids can use on break, at lunchtime, etc. We have a resource room in behind. We have our guidance area over here, and so if kids need, so they can come here for a variety of things, whether it's doing homework, answering questions on college, universities, career choices, programs here at the school, changing courses, or if they need help with their work, they can get it in the resource room, or they can just sit and relax with their friends and just enjoy the wireless here. We have a television here with the news that scrolls through. That's what the Learning Commons is. It's a hub of activity here at CCVS, and again, it's a real important piece to our school, and the kids really enjoy it, and it's been wonderful.
Learning Commons, in their physical sense, they're set up in a way that invites you, but it doesn't just do that. You should also, when you come into a place like that, intuitively be able to look around and know kind of where you want to go. You want open spaces, places on the floor for children to sit around in. You want some big tables. You want some small tables. But where you want to go is going to be fairly practical.
The library used to be a location where you could just come and you could do research, which is fantastic, and you could do some schoolwork, but it was always really quiet, and it really wasn't a hub of activity, and you wouldn't have a lot of kids coming in and out. Where here kids want to come in. They may pick up a book. They may enjoy the wireless with their iPod or their iPod Touch or a laptop, or get on one of our desktops here. So the main difference is kids can do a large number of things while they're in here now, where before it was limited to one or two things.
Basically, one of the problems, one of the great things about the information age is that there's endless amounts of information, but that's also the negative part too, because sometimes it can be hard, you don't even know where to start or where to begin, or to get a sense of what you should be looking at. So yeah, we've developed the Virtual Learning Commons, and it's an online resource for students and for staff. And basically people can then go to that place, so when they log on they can go to there, and it's kind of a jumping off place, a platform they can start from.
The Virtual Learning Commons, again, what we are doing is we're putting into virtual space what would traditionally be a library website, which is a place for students to access books, information, resources, website links, everything that they use in the research end to support their learning. But we also understand that students learn differently, so we provide, and one of the benefits of having something internet-based, we can provide all of that information format in multiple formats to suit the learning needs of the student. So we also need a space where students can contribute to knowledge and create knowledge. And this is that circle, and then we have spaces for students to upload the products of their creation of knowledge to share and to benefit the entire school board and students everywhere. And not just students, it benefits teachers, administrators.
Well, one of the things I find most exciting about the Virtual Learning Commons is it's equitable for children, and it doesn't matter where you come from, whether you're in a city or out in the country. I myself come from rural Ontario, and economies are different. This is a level playing field for all of our kids, and that's got to be one of the things I find most important as well. You only do as well as you're allowed to do.
Well, I mean, we all as teachers, we're striving to differentiate instruction. The 21st century learner is, they're moving fast. Technology's coming out at such a fast pace that it's hard sometimes to keep up. Students seem to nowadays be sort of wired technologically, so a lot of times, they teach us as well as us teaching them, so it really is a collaborative effort.
So anyone born in the last 25 years, the reality that they've grown up in is one where the online world and the offline world are seamless. They're meshed together. So they don't differentiate one from the other. Those students easily grasp the entertainment and communication value of the devices that they possess and that they use all the time, but oftentimes they don't understand the educational value of those devices. Our Learning Commons informationists, the professionals that are in those rooms, they come along and they say, here, let's use these devices, let's use the stuff they're doing so you can access the Ontario curriculum the way that you need to, and so that you can access all the resources you need to be a successful 21st century learner.
What I like about the TIS Learning Commons is, again, we're able to sit down with a student one-on-one and really train them in how to use that, but I also get to work with the teachers. So when the teachers are down there, sometimes I get to model how to use that technology, or they're modeling how to use a certain Google search engine that I've never used before. So it's that team approach. Even the students themselves show us how to use the technology. So all of us together are learning in a safe environment how to use technology to support the learning process.
So at our school, yeah, we've increased our books. We have more books now. We actually had to go and buy more shelves, and we bought them so they're movable and at the student level, but we had to purchase more shelves because we had more books. It was a really cute story. I had a student in grade 3 came in and said, wow, my eyes can barely stand this. Look how colorful all the books are now, because some of the books have been faded, they're older, and the way we produced books 40 years ago is a little different than we do now. So definitely in my experience and in my school, it was important to make sure we still had lots of books on the shelves.
I think there is a common misconception with the Learning Commons model that books will become obsolete. For myself, I truly hope this is never the case, because I think that students need books. They need to have that tactile resource in front of them. I know for myself, if I were to be in front of a computer screen doing my research all day and all night, that would not be good for me. I need that variety, and I think that books need to stay. So we should not only have computers and iPads and iPods and cell phones, we need books as well. We need a variety in the Learning Commons.
One of the things that come up when we're culling books and removing some of the books from the library that we don't think are going to help the students acquire the Ontario curriculum, some people have suggested various things to do. For instance, some people have suggested that we send them to other countries and overseas, and that sounds like a great idea at first. And my first teaching job actually was to be a principal in Kisumu, Kenya, and I had that same idea. I thought, well, I know what I can do. I can get books that people aren't using, I can take those over there, we'll ship them over, and I can have those in the orphanage that I was working at as the principal. I ran into a couple challenges with that. One, the people in Kisumu, Kenya did not want our books that we had used and that we didn't want anymore for a variety of reasons. One, the information's outdated for us, well, it's outdated for them. Also, the books aren't culturally sensitive to their area, also not linked to their curriculum. So the cost of shipping them over there was more than it would cost to actually purchase the books in the local community. And when you purchase the local books in their community, that also helps stimulate their economy, it helps give jobs, provides things with people. But basically what we're doing going forward is any books that we think could be useful in another place, they may not meet our Ontario curriculum standards, but maybe something we think will donate those books. We also then recycle some books that we have, but no books go in the dumpster. We don't just throw books in the dumpster.
Also, I noticed in the TIS Learning Commons, some of the kids are struggling throughout their day. Maybe they just had a bad morning. They've left their house, there was an argument in the house, they come in, we get a call from the teacher, Kurt, this student's struggling. Here's the assignment, can they come down and work on it? We get to help them not only with assignment, but we get to do a little bit of counseling at the same time. We get to talk to them, we get to make sure that they can go to their next class a little bit more, a little bit happier, a little understanding that there is something going wrong, but they can get through the day. And that's really what I like about the TIS Learning Center, is that we get to do some counseling, not only teaching. And I think the teaching profession has evolved. We're not just teachers anymore. We have a lot more responsibility to help students.
One thing that I enjoy going down to the Learning Commons is that it's really calm down there. So when I have a bad day, I can go down there and just work whatever I have to do. I also go down there during spare and during my online course so I can catch up on work. It's a nice environment to communicate with the teachers and have books and everything's just there, so it's convenient.
Usually the old library setting is shh, don't talk, nothing, don't say anything. What I like now about the new Learning Commons is that it's more of a not so hush-hush environment. You're allowed to talk, you're allowed to be calm in your own work environment. It's not so strict, so people don't rebel and try to talk more. You can get your thoughts out, but it's still nice work environment at the same time.
Oh yeah, it's definitely different than the library, because the library was just books and it would have one or two computers to check out books with, but now there's I'm pretty sure there's about 20 computers in our TLC now. So yeah, you go down there with your class and research and stuff. It's like a computer lab / library.
It's actually a lot better than we used to have, because now you have the comfy sofas behind me. We can sit there, you can relax, hang out with your friends, play chess. If you want, you can even go on the computers, you can read a book. You have a lot more to do than you do in a library. So you get comfy, and then you start doing your work, and once you get started, you don't realize how long you've been sitting here.
The teachers in the Learning Commons are definitely more hands-on. If they see you struggling at all, if you're not working on something, they will come and ask you, what's going on? Do you have some stuff to do? I do believe that the Learning Commons would be a good place for group work, especially if you all need research, if you all need to work together. It's a good place to sit down and just get some work done in a nice environment. And accessible to internet, accessible to just a good place to work.
Well, Learning Commons is the right way forward, because the learner of today is not the learner of yesterday. You need to have different types of resources and materials. You need to have different avenues for exploration. And this is the best way to provide that in a setting that's not the classroom. Classroom teachers working hard to do that as well, but one of the best ways to get the students to learn in unique and diverse ways is to provide them opportunities to try that out on their own and see what it looks like for them.
It's nice with a Learning Commons model, though, with the technology, with the iPads, the smartboard, the computers, and the books, to be able to have a range for documenting your sources. So we don't just want kids to be researching using one type of media. We want them, or medium. We want them to be using a variety of types to gather and generate research.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely, yes. Before, in this whole area, we actually had 7 shelves that were 24 feet long, and that's all was here, is just shelving. So now it's much better, and it's used a lot more.
I hear students say that the Learning Commons is a little bit louder, a little bit more active, and they love it. They love the fact that it's more like a chapters environment, that you go in, you can find your own space. It doesn't look like a library that it used to in the past. Right now, they have more technology. They love that. They love coming in. They love seeing 30, 35 computers. They love seeing the smartboard. They love seeing that. They love seeing the overhead projectors, and that when they come in, they have everything at their fingertips.
I absolutely love the idea that what we're doing will directly impact kids. The bottom line is they end up with better work that they're proud of, they get better marks, and it's teacher satisfaction, parent satisfaction. Everybody will be happier.
Just turn the light on there for me, Director. Thanks. All right, thank you and welcome to the table. Comments, trustees? Trustee McMillan?
Thank you, to you, Chair. A word that we heard an awful lot in that video was the word "I love." Everyone's saying, "I love this, I love that." I'm very privileged because I get to go to the TIS Learning Commons every Monday and be a part, a small part, but a part, and I get to work with the likes of Kurt Fernatich, who is absolutely top in the game as a teacher. And I can honestly say I love being there. I loved it before I had the opportunity to go there, because as you walk through the door, you just get a sense of engagement by the students. You get a sense of the kids having ownership of their learning. And it's an absolutely amazing room to be in. And I can only imagine when this concept is embraced by all other schools and embraced by the teachers as a way of presenting their teaching and using the Learning Commons to enhance learning, just how powerful this concept is going to be. So I love it. And I have no problem saying that. It's a great spot.
Trustee McRae.
Well, I'm enthralled by it all because I saw it in action in a very small community in Ward 1. And it has not only, I believe, transformed that school, and I'm talking about Pakenham, but I believe through the efforts of one of our incredible principals, it's transformed that community because the community was involved, very much involved, in working with their principal and their teachers on that project. And there isn't a lot of business left in the small community of Pakenham. I would say that community school is very much the hub of that community. And it was a project that really engaged that community. And every time I run into parents from the Pakenham school, they talk about that project. So hats off to Ron Ferguson for doing what he has done in the Pakenham school. It's just great. And I saw the before. I saw it in progress when I went to one of the meetings at Pakenham, and it's nice to see the finished product up there on the screen. So congratulations.
Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. A couple of questions and a comment or two, perhaps. If I can just ask the two gentlemen, when I look at the report that you have before us, and it's mentioned in the video, but you talk about the virtual learning commons, and it's explored just a little bit. But I want to understand, I guess, is it something that we've purchased? Is it something that we've created? What is it that we were, I guess, putting into the system?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so we both of those things. One, we purchased it, and then we also we create it. So it's both of those. And when you buy the license to be able to create that, it's like a web page. You can share content with other people who have done that. There are some universities and some other school boards that have done some of this work as well, so we've benefited from that. Our two Learning Commons managers take the credit for that. That's part of the reason we hired them, but they're the ones that are creating that. And going forward, it's going to be content that's created by the students and by staff as well.
Director, you want to add to that?
Yes, I would like to. First of all, Ron, thank you for your work, and thank you for Tim's work, and now the group that's coming along, and the leadership you provided. Trust me, when I gave them their walking orders, I wanted the libraries to be open 24/7. That just because the school is closed, the lights were off, does not mean that the library wouldn't be available. And if any of you are involved in research, you know, David, you're heavily involved in your work, is that just because the lights are out does not mean the place is closed. In fact, we know now that we had to be able to, our kids who have different types of study habits, different types of working, that we had to create an opportunity that they could get into their library 24/7. So when I sat down with Ron, at that time Tim Mills, I said, I want this thing to be open all the time, everywhere, and accessible from anywhere in the world. And they went out and did it. So that was a part of the mandate that was given to them. Thank you.
Go ahead.
And just to follow up to that, then on the virtual piece, and I'm trying to find it in here. The peer support piece. Can you just expand on that? I read it in here, but I didn't see much of it in the video. Can you just expand on that for me?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair. So there's a lot of aspects that are going to be developing as we go forward. That's brand new. The first time we showed it to anyone was at our update to the stakeholders, which happened, I think, last week, I think is when we were there. So it's brand new, but yes, there's going to be components in there that we're looking at. One of the things that the director asked us to do is to have it open 24/7, and he wanted it to be so that students were helping students, and so there's components in there where they'll be able to co-create things and collaborate, but also we're working on making things available so that they can actually phone and talk to some of their peers to get help on their assignments that they're doing through the virtual learning commons. It's all still just starting, so that stuff's not up and running, but it will be soon.
Director?
The piece as this vision goes on is that what we're hoping for, Trustee McDonald, is that the student was at home doing their homework, couldn't get in their library, but they can now get in their library. How would they know the research that they're involved in was, as the one teacher from Elmont talked about, is this good research? Or have I cited one source and should I go to another one? And our vision for this is that what we're going to be able to create online, and students hopefully do this with their 40 or 80 hours of student service, would become homework mentors. And so we would post in our websites, the following students are available to support you, and you just click in to see if they're there and say, well, I'm doing some research on such and such a thing, where should I go? And with the two new people working for us would be training those students so that we'd have some peer helping for our libraries all the time. So Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon, you could very well have a student online who's an expert perhaps on planetary things or an expert on Shakespeare. And if you're doing some work, you say, you tap them in or beep them or poke them. The wizard coming out of me. You'd say, are you there, and is this a quality piece? And what we'd see is a very interactive piece is going on, and that's our vision for it, if I'm handling it the proper way.
Yeah, excellent.
So I guess to follow up with the virtual piece, and then I'm going to get into the next phases, next step, sorry. On the virtual piece, and you've talked about it a little bit, I guess, from a peer support standpoint, and it may not be a fair question to you, maybe more of an IT Jeremy question. Is there an opportunity for teachers, and I've done some reading and looking at some work that's being done in the U.S. There's a flipped classroom. Teachers are providing a lesson through a podcast of sort of video blog. Students are getting that in the evening, weekend, whatever the case might be, and then the support that they require is provided in the classroom during the day. Is there the ability that teachers can provide that information out as well, or a repository for teachers to put information there from previous class lessons or whatever the case might be?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair, yes, there is. It's built to do that. The software will handle that with ease.
Superintendent Carswell?
Yeah, just in addition to the virtual learning commons, there's also support coming from the ministry in terms of a learning management system for regular classroom teachers to use in managing virtual and digital content. So the catchphrase for that is blended learning. So we're working to bring that into the classroom teacher's repertoire. So not as e-learning, that's not the way I take the course. I'm taking the course with my regular classroom teacher. How do we bring the assets of learning that are virtual and digital into that classroom space, and how do we help teachers and students manage that information? So that's another piece that comes that comes with this. It's not related directly to the Learning Commons, but indirectly being able to connect to things like the virtual Learning Commons and things like that. It's another tool in the toolkit.
Okay, just before you go on, I'm just going to see if anybody else that has not spoken yet has any questions. Trustee McAllister, and I'll come back to you, Trustee McDonald. Trustee McAllister.
I have a question with regard to the Learning Commons informationist. My understanding is that the informationists are shared by families of schools. Can these individuals devote sufficient time to each goal?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair. Yes. What we've seen with some of the steps we've taken to cull books and get rid of some things that we were doing, some past practices, and focusing on this, it's freed up some of their time. I know in my area, I'll just speak to that one, but yes, we've seen an increase in her availability to students and to staff and helping them with the Learning Commons model in my family of schools.
Superintendent Carswell?
Yeah, just one of the added features of something, for example, like the virtual Learning Commons, and we were looking at a prototype of that last week, is that the informationists are collaboratively populating it. So rather than one informationist have to cover the entire Ontario curriculum by themselves, they work as a collective team to assemble artifacts and objects for learning. So being in the virtual space lets that staff collaborate and lever the work of one another in ways that maybe they weren't able to do before when they had the physical book. So their ability to collaborate in this virtual Learning Commons is really extended, and I think our information managers are really trying to build on that early to bring them together as a team and to show that, you know, many hands make light work, as it were, in terms of meeting this challenge.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Trustee McDonald?
Thank you. Going back then to the next steps piece, four phases or four pieces within the next steps. Is it laid out based on how you want to roll things out, or is it just randomly put there from a point 1, 2, 3 to 4?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair. I don't have it in front of me. The report was put together by our managers. I can ask them about that and get back to you.
So the first one is 3.1 virtual Learning Commons rollout. 2 is the building Learning Commons informationist capacity.
Yeah.
3 is implementing technology-based learning pilot projects. And 4, transforming physical spaces.
Yeah, no, they're not ordered in. It's happening, it depends on the area that you're in. There may be some places they already had their physical space in pretty good shape and looking a lot like the Commons. So in that area, then they're focusing on maybe the LCIs and what's going on with them and changing their role a bit in that particular school. And then places like at Pakenham where we, as Ann said, we had to make some significant changes to the physical space.
And just to follow up then to that, from the transformation in a physical space or even the virtual Learning Commons, is there a cost associated to the school to do that?
Yeah, through you, Chair. There's definitely a cost when you do some of those things. In Pakenham, we're a small school, but we were able to. There's a variety of ways that we did that. One is looking at how we're going to spend the budget, the money that we have in our budget, and kind of reallocating some of our resources. And as Ann said, we had some community partners that stepped forward and were excited about what we're doing, and some businesses that said we want to help out with this and helped out in that way as well. For instance, I know I mentioned on there that we had all new books, and that was through a partnership with a local hub that lots of parents, their children read the book once or twice, or they grow up and they're in great shape, beautiful books, and so some of those are fantastic resources, especially for our reading programs, and they've donated those. So those kinds of community partnerships have helped, but there is money too in our budgets to make some of the costs. I don't know if you want to speak to that as a secondary.
From a secondary perspective, again, it was really trying to ensure that the space was open and accessible to students at all times. So some of it, was in terms of purchasing some resources around, you've seen the comfy chairs and that kind of thing, was to get it away from the sitting at the uncomfortable chair and the desk and that kind of thing, and really to try and make it more of a more flexible environment to assist students.
And I respect the fact that it's certainly, there is a cost associated to it, but I guess where I was leaning towards is, I'm all in favor of allowing money to flow to the school to have some, autonomy on how the priorities are addressed within the school and in that community. I guess my concern is that if it's a choice factor, what is being potentially not addressed or not being utilized, I guess, from a school budget standpoint. And I just want to make sure that Learning Commons, if there's money that we can assist from a board level budget to move into schools, that we need to pay attention to those kinds of things, because I don't want it to impact anything else within the school. I think it's important, but it shouldn't be this or that kind of scenario. That's where I was kind of leading towards. Just to wrap up, I guess from my comment standpoint is I think I was impressed with the video. I think it's important for us to understand the perspective that we hear from our students, and no disrespect to the student trustee, but we need to make sure that we understand what's happening within the schools and the other principals as well for being there. And I think that the takeaway for me is that this is uniquely different in our schools, uniquely different in our communities. And as much as we are trying to do the right thing for our students, we also need to be competitive. And if we're not competitive to get every student into our school, we're also facing those ill effects of having declining enrollment. So if we can't capture more market share, there's other issues that play. And I think this is a differentiating factor for us. I mean, we're paying attention to how students want to be engaged in their school. And this is one aspect. I'm not saying this is a silver bullet, but I think it's one aspect, and I think it's going to help us whenever parents and students look at our schools where we have this in place and when we can roll it out to others. This will help them in the decision-making process. I mean, not to say that we have other things in our school. I mean, our schools are great environments, but this is one extra piece that's going to assist us. So thank you for doing this and making sure the information is here. But I think it was great to have the opportunity to have those individuals as teachers, those principals, and those students. And it's far better for us to hear it from their site than having them come in here and stand before us. So it was a great job. Thank you.
Trustee Swan.
Through you, Chair. And I'm just kind of wondering, I thought that was a very nicely done video. But I have a question in regards to, we heard they love it. How are we going back to our students to see what positive, are we going back to them even, to see what ways we can improve it for them? I mean, is there any surveys done with them? What would you like to see done better? How can we improve upon this? What don't you like about this? Have we consulted the students?
Ron?
Through you, Chair. I'll speak to in my school. Yes, absolutely. I have a YouTube video that I can maybe send you the link to, and it's the students actually at the start going through their library and giving me a list of demands. Basically, these very cute grade 6 girls of what they wanted to see and what they thought would help their learning, and then you see them again afterwards talking about it. But absolutely, I mean, as a principal, and I think all principals do that, they're talking to their student body and finding out what it is what they think they need to. We, for our school success plan, for instance, and this is part of it, we have students on our team, and so they have input. They're at the table. They're there with our town council. They're there with the teachers, and they're helping us make these decisions as well.
Don, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the other thing I would add is at the meeting that we had last week, we had some student participation there, and part of it was really asking them some of the questions. What are some of the next steps we need to take a look at in moving this forward? What are some of the things that you like? What are some of the things you would like to see as well? Some of the other data collection means we have for things like this are through things like our Tell Them From Me surveys and that put some open-ended questions in there. And quite often, one of the things I know at TIS, went from having basically access when the library tech was there, which was at that point about 2 days a week, to now where it's open every period, every day of the week kind of thing. I think that was one of the things when we're asking what are some of the things you would like to see improved and moved on with was around the TLC. Was to continue the work down there.
Director?
Trustee Swan, the piece that we have to do now, and I believe, Ian, we had students at the review last week as well, and we had students at the very first, actually we had, I believe, about 20 students, the very first sort of call to action on this issue. The concern I have right now going through, and I think the question, if I was a trustee, I would asking, where is this in my school? Because I think the question right now for me is, I would say roughly 25% of our schools have jumped in and made this happen, and others are perhaps hoping that the special budget's going to come along and we'll be able to do something differently. I think that we discovered through this run, and certainly at TIS, you've had over 10,000 kids in last year in the Learning Commons, is that this is a different way of doing business. And it's serving our schools and our communities much more effectively. What I'd be asking is, where are we with this? And as you go into your schools, to ask that very, very question, because as I think, as Dawn has said, if you're sort of waiting for your technician to change your books and to call the collection once a month or whatever, that's not going to be effective use of your resources in your school. And I think that we're proving now there's a better way to do business. And I have chosen 25% because I'm in the schools quite a bit. And I certainly take note that I was in Emer's Corners the other day, and they have done a very effective job with theirs. But I know that I went down the road, and I was in another school in Cornwall a little bit later, and it was just as if they'd never heard that we were doing this.
Separate board?
It wasn't a separate board, no. It was one of our schools. So I guess I'd like to further sort of push Trustee Swan's question a little further. Do you see the way of getting to all the schools?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I do. People are starting to talk about it. People are getting excited about it. I think when we launch the virtual learning commons as well, that's going to help. But our two managers are doing an excellent job. Basically, where they're going next, their direction is they're recording as they make the transformation, as we did at Pakenham. They're recording this, and they're taking detailed notes on what they're doing, video stuff, and then they're doing some pilot projects, and then they're going to take that to other schools around. And so they're kind of leading the charge with that too, to kind of help maybe, like as the director said, some people that maybe haven't heard about it or aren't really catching the wave yet, for them to see it in action and see the transformation that can happen in your school, as this is kind of the hub and where it starts from. So it's going to be exciting to see what they do, but that's certainly in our plans as a committee moving forward, and that's the focus of our managers right now, is how do the two things: one, training the Learning Commons informationists, and then the second one is taking it to make sure that it is in all of our schools.
Trustee Swan?
Through you, Chair, again. In regards to this, are we able to put like a link on the student page on the website, the site that you did the video on, perhaps, so students can see it in schools that don't have it there yet?
Go ahead.
Through you, Chair. You mean on the My UCDSB?
Yeah.
Yes, that's going to happen. We're working with IT closely on all of this. So.
Trustee Kirkner?
I remember when this presentation was brought to the board initially, the idea of Learning Commons, and I was thrilled about it. I thought this was a good way to be going with our libraries that seem to be getting more stagnant as the years went on. And I think at the time some of the trustees were quite concerned at the fact that books were going to be thrown out, and I was really pleased to see in this report tonight that books are not being thrown out, they're being culled. Yes, they need to be culled, but you were adding more to it, so I think that alleviates some of our concerns. And just to request, Chair, through to the Director, if it's possible for us to be given a list of our schools or the schools that are involved in Commons. We've heard about 3 tonight. I'd like to know what stage my schools are in Ward 10, whether they're not at all there yet. I know some facilities that would be perfect for this. Is that possible, to get a list as to where we are with the schools in our board?
You can send one out.
First of all, I believe that's being organized, and that this is an up-to-date report for you, because they've been doing a lot of work, and we felt you should know what's going on. I believe now, and perhaps I think this is what Ian wants to go, how we're going to make this, scale this out for every school, will be the real activity of the leadership now of the schools, to ensure that a principal or a school can't avoid this. That's coming to your location. So how are you dealing with it? Because we do, and trustees know, some are more reluctant to get on, some are are waiting to see what's going to happen. But perhaps through you, Chair, that perhaps Ian can talk a little bit about how we're going to scale this out. Is that fair?
Yeah, and just if I may, just a couple of things. I just wanted to point out the fact that I've invited Don and Ron here, not because they look so much alike, not because they both taught in Africa. I actually brought them here because they're quite different. different in that we have largest secondary school population, secondary, and we have Pakenham, small elementary school, and yet we have the same unifying concept. So I think it's important to understand this is a concept that can find its way and be translated into a meaningful way in any of our schools. And it certainly is our plan to do so. We know that we could just send out a memo and we could throw a switch and order people to do this, but I think there's great value in people negotiating the meaning and making sense of this on their local site. That's what we've done with our learning resource coach model across this board in special education. We've done it in lots of programming work with hubs and nodes and things like that. So we're not afraid of getting to scale, allowing people to make sense of that change in their own site, and rather than use a hammer, really bring in lots of support. We have informationists, we have managers, we have a strong dedicated peer group of principals that are happy to share their understandings, their learnings, and their problems to make sure that this is a possibility for each and every Upper Canada student.
And to finally wrap it up, Trustee Cartner, is that I think you're going to see a report that's the final one that's going to talk about implementation, and that Ron and Eric are going to see a part of this working with our new managers. Because our managers know exactly where all the schools are at, right? They've visited every school, they're in every school. I think they know the hot spots, and now as they work with the principals, I think they're going to see some of the reluctant group to jump in, and there's going to be a lot of coaching, encouragement, and I really believe through the program department's work, I think we're going to be asking more questions about how does this fit into your school. I think Ron said it. Where is this in your school improvement plan? And I think those will be the final steps of E42.
Go ahead, Trustee Kirkner. Yeah.
I noticed that you've referred to principals and the LCIs and some of the managers and so on. Are the staffs themselves being asked or getting on side with this, seeing the importance of it?
Director?
I see it in typical change-related change management, that we have some people saying, you know, this should have happened years ago, like where were you? We have other groups that are hugging the cold books as if, and I think Ron did a very polite job of saying, you know, we've sent books to Africa that are sitting on docks because they're saying they're no good for you, why'd you send them to us? And we have a real range, and I think as Ian has said, I think we're working on change management, and I think we're going to push this through. But I think potentially on all of our staffs there is a cross-section. I was at one of our high schools the other day, and they can't wait for this to get going, and so I'm saying, well, why not? And we have sort of one person holding the whole group hostage, saying, well, that's not how libraries are supposed to run, and this person decided that, and was really holding the whole school hostage on their interpretation of the library. And this person enjoys, as you know from your years, a significant level of power on the staff, and is an opinion maker and sets a sort of standard as you go through, and that's going to be a difficult place, and the principal and the staff are going to have to, you know, do the thing. And I think it'd be interesting for the trustees when you ask the question, why not in our school? Because I know there hasn't been a single parent that has come out and been a part of this that's not said this should be happening in our school.
To some extent, this program is different from some in that it really needs to be from the bottom up, right? It's really difficult to mandate from central office. Is that correct? Is that the way you've kind of laid this out? That it.
I think it's a bit of a sandwich. I mean, you have the principal's leadership to guide the instructional program, you know, building the vision, engaging staff in the promise and the potential. At the same time, we have informationists who really bring some boots on the ground support in some real pragmatic ways. Just looking at the virtual learning commons, you know, you can see as a teacher, as soon as I see that, I'm going to be connected instantly because they've connected online resources for my instruction in grade 3 math. So they've really, you know, when a teacher's saying, well, how would I make sense of this? I'm not really sure. I'm not all that confident. You've got something that is really well managed, that's presentable and accessible. So there's the high-end vision, which is the dream and the possibility, but there's some real underlying management stuff, happening at the same time to support people, to give them practical access to resources. And in between, people have to navigate that meaning. So it's difficult to change without inviting engagement of the people that you want to go through the change with. So our approach has been to invite engagement and possibility, and I think we've had a great deal of success bringing things to scale in that fashion.
Trustee Buckland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to move to something specific for the principal from TIS, thinking of a senior student doing a research paper, maybe literary, historical, whatever, where the traditional approach was to go to books or periodicals, either in the class, school library, community library, whatever, and now is it Google only is my fear. But I just wonder if you could outline briefly how that might be different as a student process in doing a formal research paper.
So what did it look like before the Learning Commons, and what does it look like now?
Well, even how it looks now. I mean,
right.
We know the traditional approach, I think.
Okay. So how do they incorporate the various... Don?
Through you, Chair. Especially as one of the things that we're also hearing from the students, and again, maybe I'm going to diverge for a second here, in terms of a lot of the books that they're saying they want to see, a lot of it is more the fiction resources that they want to see. There's a lot less reliance on the nonfiction resources than there has been in the past, things like encyclopedias and those kind of things that would have been more, maybe the more traditional way of doing it. Some of the role of the folks that we have staffed in our TLC, be it our student success teacher, might be the learning resource teacher, the Learning Commons informationist, when she's there, are there to help access some of these resources. Some of the students that you saw working in there are very good and have very good research skills already in terms of knowing how to access resources and, having the, the detector on to know that this is a good resource or this isn't. There are a number of other students in there that don't, and I think one of the advantages that we've been able to put in place right now is that, as Kurt Fernert had said on there, is that we have the staff in there to have a sense of, okay, who are the students that need some of that extra assistance in knowing what's going to go on. One of the things when we had the meeting last week in Kempville was also, I think, through the VLC, is to take a look at trying to get to maybe a more common way of looking at how we source information. And I know this is something that we've been looking at, the 3 different schools I've been able to be at, of looking at some sort of common method so that we all have a sort of general sense of what we're going to be looking at, what kinds of information are we looking for, and as well, how are we going to source that information to make that a little bit easier for students and also make it easier for staff as well in terms of what's expected.
Go ahead, Trustee Buckland.
I don't want the blind leading the blind. I mean, if it's a senior student, you haven't got anything else but senior students as mentors, so you'll have to rely, this extra guidance you're speaking of comes from your informationist, or?
It'll be, we have, the way we have it staffed right now is that we'll have a student success teacher in there, or a learning resource teacher in there, or sometimes a combination of both in each period. With the part of their role is to assist students with their research. And it's not only students that are doing sort of the traditional, I have an essay or a report I have to get done. We're seeing more and more students that are in there working on online courses, and where they really are doing completely self-directed learning, not just for that single assignment, but really for the whole course. And it's needing to provide resources to help support those students as well. So it's, we're getting at sort of the new way that students are learning, or different ways that students are learning, and I think one of the big values of how it's set up right now is that it provides that assistance for, student X is going to need one kind of assistance, student Y is going to need another kind of assistance, and it's to make it more flexible in terms of how we're supporting students and how they're learning.
Just to conclude a comment, it sounds as though the groups that have this, the schools that have this, have a much greater edge on pupil-teacher ratio than those who do not have the Learning Commons.
Do you want to pick up on the comment just before that?
Well, I'll comment on both. The first one is the classroom teacher still. Let's say that it's a grade 11 English class is doing an assignment. When the kids go down to the Learning Commons, the teacher just sort of holy-poly just sends them down there. The teacher should be doing a really good job of saying, this is where you should be looking, here is where perhaps you shouldn't be looking, and here are different sources. For example, if you were doing a critique on Kerouac's work across America, and you didn't pull out probably the top 2 or 3 bloggers from Harvard English and say, this is what they're saying about Kerouac's work, then the teacher perhaps, I don't believe, has instructed the kids properly to do their research as you go through. And I think what has to happen, the teacher in the classroom still has a very important job, Don, and correct me if I'm out there, of really sort of setting a framework for how they're going to go about doing the research, and then introducing the students to even different methodologies of the rigorous debate that you should have with yourself. Is this a good, great, or is this a pretty good professional source that I should be citing as I prove my position on this particular paper? And then the second one, I'll let you know, the second query that you had, Trustee Buckland. Dawn has no better staffing, and CCS has no better staff than any other school. This is done through the staffing allocation that is given to them.
Don?
Through you, Chair, I would agree with what Director Thomas said in terms of, there's the part that the teacher has to play in terms of setting the overall framework. I think a lot of what we're seeing on a more independent basis in the TLC is sort of the follow-up for what the students are going to be doing when they may be working in there independently. To give you a sense of how students come into the TLC, sometimes students, if they have if it's a senior student, maybe if they're in grade 12, they may have a spare and they may be working in there. If they are coming into work, then they sign in to work. If it's a student that maybe it's during the latter part of a classroom period and the student has asked for the teacher's permission to come down and work, then there's the teacher calls ahead to Kurt or whoever else is working in the TLC and informs them that the student's coming down, so they'll sign in. Sometimes it'll be the class, let's say, 4U law class are going to be coming down to do some common research. And then, the teacher may bring down the whole class. So there are sort of different ways that the students will be coming into the TLC. So, again, it's more of a supervised area. We also, in our building, we have, the cafeteria sort of, if you want the unsupervised, I shouldn't say completely unsupervised, obviously, but it's more of the less supervised learning environment, whereas the Learning Commons is really the very supervised and very structured learning environment for that purpose in terms of providing the extra assistance. One of the things as well, I think, from the VLCs and some of the things that the Learning Commons information is starting to develop is, what are maybe some of those blogs that are out there, for if you're looking at a 4U English course. And I think that's going to be invaluable in terms of, we've been trying this, I think, in a lot of ways with things like teacher to teacher and other methods within the board to help teachers share these kind of electronic media and again, it's trying to find ways to, have teachers share their best practices, but also find things that are going to engage students in the ways that, they learn best, and then some of the ways that help engage them in terms of what we're really trying to get them to do in the building.
Okay, Trustee Garrow.
Through you, Chair.
Sorry, Trustee Garrow. Sorry. Superintendent Carswell, do you want to chip in on that?
I just wanted one quick thing,
Sorry,
because
Trustee
at my advanced age now, my memory's not so good. I want to thank Allison Grange, who put this video together for you, and I didn't want to lose sight of that, and thank you for letting me get that in there, Trustee Garrow.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Garrow, floor is yours.
I always like the little plug through you, Chair. Sometimes I go online and I go on the TED, the TED Talks and that, and I always remember where Sir Ken Robinson, and some of his things, and I think this is probably one of the best examples I've seen, heard, viewed, that is looking at some of the approaches that he's trying to do to change education as it evolves. And it really strikes me that, what I've heard, being a hub of a community, when I look at our own First Nation communities, that's what we're always trying to do, is have the school be that hub. But also combining, our students are different.
they're different today than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago, and the library has definitely changed, but be able to use that. And I think what he was saying is that we have to look at very innovative approaches, and you're doing it, and I have to applaud you for that, because he blew me away when he speaks, and I keep going back to a lot of his talks, and this is one fine example of that. So, thank you.
I think you see, Peter, that's influenced our thinking.
It had to be, because, but maybe if I can just come back, Chair, it's just that it's so much that we don't have in our communities, our First Nation communities yet, and so I really want to share this with, of course, Akwesasne Mohawk Board, but also with the other Native trustees to say, this is what we're doing in Upper Canada, and it follows along the lines of some really unique approaches of utilizing what we looked at libraries as a whole different approach, and for students, I mean, as I said, they're much more glib and on technology and what have you, and it's combining that. So,
Thanks, Trustee Garrow, and thanks everybody. I appreciate, I've got you too, for the fact that you're waiting to be recognized from me, unlike the director. Trustee McMillan.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. It's interesting that you had mentioned Ken Robinson, because Ken Robinson would definitely be very pleased with what he's seeing, but he would also caution to make sure that the creativity is still there, because he is so huge on creative thinking and engaging kids through the creative process. What I was going to say actually was addressed by the director when he was talking about the role of the teacher. And when I see the virtual commons, the concern that I do have, I think it's a wonderful idea, but my concern is that our fundamentalists, as Wayne Hulley calls them in the school, will use the virtual commons as the new textbook. And to my way of thinking, there needs to be an element of creative or of critical thinking built into that process, where the informationists are not the only ones who are selecting the sources, because our students are going to be lifelong learners. There's no question about that. They're going to use the internet at the source, and as Trustee Garrow just said, our students grow up with technology in their hand. That is second nature to them, but they do not have the skills to navigate that world, and they need to be taught that. And if we're going to have kids use the virtual learning commons, there still has to be that element of teaching the kids to look at sites, look at information, check the validity, the reliability, and that is a skill that has to be taught beyond content. And that is the responsibility of not only the informationists and the people in the learning commons, but also our teaching staff. Because I think critical thinking has to be built into this, as well as the creative thinking process. It cannot become the new textbook for our fundamentalists. It has to be something that's going to grow and become part of the next stage of learning in the 21st century.
Trustee McDonald.
Thank you. Trustee Garrow mentioned how students are different now than they were 10, 15 years ago. In fact, when I was in school 10, 15, 20 years ago, the school was different. And it was different because the library was open all day, and there was a librarian. And that evolved to the point where we're not funded for the librarian. There's issues around many, many things. But the situation that we have before us, and the result of some things and the evolution between the different charters, is that we had a presentation from a group concerned, and it's, the director mentioned that we had a group that came and was concerned that the library was closed. Students could not access the library. They wanted the library open. Nothing to change, but the library to open. And rather than just trying to find a way to keep the library open, we ventured out into what was called the books, blogs, and tweets. And Phil worked on that as well to make sure we were aligned. And now it's evolved into the Learning Commons. And I think it's important for us to note that when we have a situation before us, that we really look at how we resolve it, what is the real issue, and how we can best serve the needs of the students for the future. And I think, the easiest thing for us to do was to hire a couple of people and keep libraries open. We didn't take the easy route. We put a lot of work into something to try and find a good solution that's going to benefit kids. At the end of the day, we're talking about how quickly can we get it done. I want my school to have it. There's a lot of things associated to it, but we're here because we put the time in to do it, rather than just trying to keep a door open. So, put that into perspective, and I think it's important that we put that back on the table and recognize what the director had said. So I think, moving forward, those are the things that maybe wasn't very well welcomed at the time, that we were going to go out and do books, blogs, and tweets. But I think the end result, we've achieved what we wanted and then some. So thank you.
All right, I don't see any other comments. I want to thank our presenters, thank the communication team for putting that together. That I think was very interesting, and I think something that brought a different dimension to the presentation. So thank you for that. Thank you, gentlemen. And I wanted, yeah, you're more than welcome to stay, though. We're going to kick you out of those nice seats there, though. Trustees, you know that we've been working on this electronic voting, and just for the sake of trying it, we have our tech team in the back monitoring this. They're in the far back. I'd like to just run on a vote to receive this report. So.
Hang on, I gotta get back in because it logs me out. Does it log you out? Does it log you out? Yeah.
Everybody's still up and running?
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's going to be moved by Trustee McCray and seconded by Trustee Richards. This will not be recorded, team. It's just for the sake of...
Okay, it's open.
All right, so put up your hand when you get the voting. I got mine. Everybody's got it?
Voting.
Yep, you got your voting thing? Okay.
He doesn't.
No, you don't have it?
No.
Where is it?
Peter doesn't have it.
Art doesn't have it either.
No, it's not here.
You gotta make sure that you're registered and not just viewing the agenda. You had to join the meeting and not just view the agenda.
Okay.
On the agenda item.
Okay.
Again.
Okay. All right, just vote, everybody, and those that can, and we'll let them know. That took, from the time that you said to the time that you got it, how long was it? So it wasn't too long?
No, should have brought your laptop.
Okay, so that's fixed. Then we just need to figure out why a couple of people...
Join the meeting.
Yeah, but you're not, though, because you should have the person next to it. There's something not quite
Or
right
maybe
about
you didn't
yours.
authenticate and you just joined the other way?
Yeah.
that?
Okay,
If you went in the public site?
he's not actually here, so strike him off. All right, team, thanks very much. We're going to move on now. Night is slipping away on us. We're going to move on now to the Credo review. Invite Phil Dawes and Stephanie Ruddock to come up. Oh, they're there. Awesome. Just a little context, guys, or trustees. And forgive me if it's oversimplified, but typically what happens in reports like this is this step that we're engaged in often is administration goes ahead and completes it for us. We're trying to inject our job in at different points, and working with David and administration and management council, we've been trying to figure out, when is the appropriate time. So just to give you a bit of background, we asked that this Credo review be done. I think it was in David's plans nonetheless. That was over a year ago now. Team has been working on it. They've gone out and done feedback. One of the things that we would have automatically done is had a trustee feedback session, perhaps at a working session or at a meeting like this. But as we were thinking about it, it kind of dawned on us that that's really double feedback, because our communities who we represent, we tasked our administration with going out and collecting that feedback. So really, we would be duplicating the process. So they've done the feedback, they've gone out and done the work through, and they'll explain what they've done. They're now presenting us with the raw data. At this point, it's not really this is not set up to offer feedback. It's to offer direction to administration, to David and his team on where we want the credo to go forward. So there'll be a number of questions if you've read the had a chance to read the report, you know, things on length and stuff. So that's going to be our job, is providing them the direction. Not to write the credo tonight. That's not, I don't think that that's what we want to get into, but offering them direction, giving them a sense of where we'd like them to take it, and then they'll go back and do that and then return to us with a draft for us to consider. Everybody, when I say understand, my wife hits me, so I won't say that. So everybody following the process that we're on, like...
Do you make sense?
Am I making sense? Thank you. I always think I'm making sense. Anyway, okay.
I saw some nods.
You saw some nods, that's great. Okay, so with that introduction out of the way, Phil, it's over to you.
Well, thank you, Chair. And thanks to all of you for this opportunity to present our report on the topic of feedback from the 2012 Credo Review. And the Credo is, of course, a very important document. It's a foundation for the strategic plan of the board because it confirms the responsibilities that the Upper Canada District School Board holds to our students, parents, staff, and communities. Now, throughout the month of February, Stephanie and I led a process to review feedback, receive feedback from across the system to help the board understand how the Credo is being used in schools. You'll notice that there are 4 appendices to your report. Appendix A is a summary of the feedback received from the review. Appendix B is a copy of the survey tool that was used for this review. Appendix C is a presentation of Credo in action stories, and we'll give you some more information on that as we proceed. And Appendix D is, of course, a copy of the Credo itself. And so with your indulgence, what we'd like to do is take you through Appendix A, which is a summary of the feedback received, and you'll see the report up on the screen. And what Stephanie would like to do is just take you through each of the sections in the report. So we're going to do a bit of a transverse back and forth, and I know she'll jump in when she needs to say something, and I'll do the same for her.
Thanks.
So let's begin, if we could, with section 1 of the report, which is background and purpose. Now, this feedback actually follows a system-wide review that was completed in 2006-07. We could kind of consider this review to be a mini review, because in 2006 and 07, of course, there was a system-wide review led by Gina Camerano at the time. Some of you may recall Gina. She was a principal of program department and had the lead on developing our Character Always Virtues. And as a parallel process to developing the Character Always Virtues, Gina also led a committee which was called the Character in Our Community Committee. And again, it paralleled the development of the 8 Character Always Virtues, but the CIOC, as it was called at the time, began by researching a number of organizations. In particular, the group was interested in the Credo that's in place by the Johnson & Johnson company. And with that initial research work, a draft of the Credo, as we now know it, was developed and was shared right across the region, our entire board. This went on over a number of months. The language was edited throughout the course of the year and included several opportunities for wording changes from the Board of Trustees at that time as well. So following this extensive system review, plaques of the Credo were eventually developed and actually distributed to schools for the startup of the 2009-2010 school year. And of course, since that time, the importance of the Character Always Credo has become recognized across the system for reaffirming the responsibilities we hold personally and as an organization to the people we serve, our students, parents, staff, and communities. The Credo supports the UCDSB mission, which reads, "We prepare all students for a successful life," and it, of course, supports the CREW strategic plan. But we must also remember that we call it a living credo for a reason. We call it a living credo because it's intended to act as an active document, to inspire us, to guide us, to help us align everything that we do, both personally and as a system, with the students and communities that we serve. But it's also a living document that, because like the strategic plan, it needs to be reviewed from time to time to make sure that it remains relevant and useful. So that's the purpose behind this particular review. Not necessarily to supersede all of the initial work that was completed with the original system review back in 2006, but to help us to understand the extent to which it is acting with alignment of its originally intended purpose. So if I could refer you to section 2 of the report, you'll see that the review was specifically undertaken to receive feedback from across the system to help the board with 2 specific objectives. Number 1, to understand how the Credo is being used in schools, and number 2, to consider updates to the language of the Credo itself. So to do this, as outlined under section 3 of the report, we developed a methodology to receive both quantitative and qualitative feedback from across the system. And this was achieved through 3 key approaches. Number 1, there was an online survey developed, a copy of which is provided as Appendix B to your report. Number 2, we received feedback from principals, vice principals, school leaders, and head office managers at a crew system day that was held at the North Granville Municipal Center on February the 8th, 2012. And thirdly, we received direct feedback from school visits and interviews with students, parents, and community representatives, of which Stephanie took a direct lead on that part of the process, and she'll be speaking to that in a minute. A breakdown of the participation that we received for this review is outlined in the table at the top of page 2 and is now on the screen. We had about 480 responses to the online survey, 320 responses at the crew day, and about 200 participants through school visits and interviews. So in all, about 1,000 people participated in this review. Section 4 of the report offers an indication of the quantitative responses received. These are the specific responses we received to questions 1 through 4 of the online survey, which were radio button responses, yes, no type answers to very specific questions. So with respect to question 1, which read, please identify your role within the UCDSB, it can be seen that teachers were by far the most numerous participants, representing about 47% of all of the online responses received. School support staff were the second most numerous at 26%, and we feel good about that response rate because those are the 2 largest employee groups in the Upper Canada District School Board. From question 2, we can see that elementary school respondents outnumbered their secondary school respondents by about 19 percentage points, but again, probably indicative of the fact that we have more elementary staff than secondary staff overall. At the top of page 3, we've provided the quantitative feedback received to the questions number 3, to what extent are you familiar with the UCDSB Credo? And question number 4, to what extent does the UCDSB meet its responsibilities as stated in the Credo? The response to these 2 questions we feel are very favorable, with 71.7% of respondents indicating that they are either familiar or very familiar with the Credo, and fully 50% of respondents indicating that the board currently meets or exceeds its responsibilities as stated in the Credo. So with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Stephanie to talk a bit more about the qualitative feedback that we received through the review.
Thanks, Bill. The qualitative responses included the open-ended questions. That was questions 4 to 8 on the survey. The crew day, which included feedback from over 300 people and interviews with people during school visits, hub meetings, emails, and telephone conversations with parents. So the responses fall under 2 main themes. What do you like about the Credo, and do you have any suggestions for improvement? Overall, when I look at both of those, it was overwhelming with the positive feedback about the Credo. In fact, everyone who responded liked that the Credo existed. People liked that it was inclusive of all the stakeholders as it addressed students, families, employees, and community. Everyone commented that the organization of the credo, that for our responsibilities as the adults, that we're listing students first in our responsibilities. People liked that what the credo stands for, our goal, key messages, our values, our overall intent. People also liked that the adults who work for Upper Canada have responsibilities in writing, and that who we are responsible to. Some quotes that stuck with me about the credo that were positive. I like the credo because it helps ensure a unified vision. It reminds us about what is important and creates accountability for all. It's transparent. And this one I actually had to look up, and I'll tell you why. Serves the same function as a keel on a sailboat, and I'm not a sailor, so sorry, Ian. And I had, okay, a keel, is that a rudder? What's the difference between a keel and a rudder? And so I did look it up in a beginner sailboat site, and it said it prevents the boat from being blown sideways by the wind. I thought, wow, what a great analogy, especially in education, where when we're being bombarded with different things coming at us and we have to make a decision, the credo keeps us balanced and it keeps us from tipping over. And I thought that was a really good analogy. People also like that the credo combines academics with character development. It's not just about academics, and that it helps, that both of those things help prepare students for a successful life. It's a whole person approach. People like the comprehensive structure for the language. In particular, if you look at the credo, the first line is bold, has bolded, and then it gives you the details, and people like that structure. And the last one is that they like that the last paragraph, that we're including our responsibilities to the environment. That why we received a lot of positive feedback about that. While most of our feedback was positive and in favor of the present credo, there were some suggestions for improvement. Suggestions for improvement fall under two main categories: communication, the length and the language, and implementation. And implementation includes awareness building, professional development, collaboration, deeper alignment, and personalization to the credo. So you have 8 points, and I've combined them because I felt that they were linked. So points 1, 3, and 4 talk about making the credo shorter and more concise. And respondents have suggested, a lot of the feedback suggested minor wording changes and making the credo language more concise and improve readability, especially for parents. Many respondents also suggested stronger language in the credo in the environment paragraph. As it stands now, it's more of awareness type of language, promoting environmental stewardship, and people want more action wording. Second point, people thought that the credo could be improved with stronger implementation, more staff follow through on it. Most staff in schools, when you've went through discussions, have not really reflected on their daily work life and how the school's actions connect with the credo. How do my actions reflect my responsibilities as stated in the credo? Point 5, the credo could be improved by providing more resources for its implementation through professional development and collaboration with colleagues. And I felt that that also aligned with point number 7 about emphasizing in the credo that the 90% graduation goal, that we are maintaining high standards. Staff would like more opportunities to discuss how to meet students' needs effectively, particularly with declining enrollment and the challenges that arise from this. Communication and collaboration are needed to share best practices and strategies that will meet the board's 90% graduation rate. Point 6, people would like to see that the credo includes mental health. Right now, at the very top paragraph, it doesn't mention mental health, so people would like to see that that's included. And the last but not least, that it could be improved by making it more visible in our schools and communities. Again, if you look at those points, it really falls under two categories: implementation and communication.
As mentioned at the beginning from Chair Petersma, what we're giving you tonight is, in essence, raw data. In other words, this is the information we heard from our review, and we felt it was prudent to have a section in the report, and we've got it on page 4 under section 6. We've taken this opportunity to remind trustees that the information received from this review needs to be interpreted with some care. This presentation of the feedback received for the review is in response to very specific questions under a variety of conditions and assumptions. So we've simply made the point that trustees may wish to interpret this information, remembering that it's only one perspective and needs to be balanced with the system view of the overarching purpose and function of the Credo itself. May wish to build upon the evidence of this review that the Credo is a respected belief statement used by many staff across the board to make school a positive learning environment for all, and perhaps focus on alternative formats and communication of the Credo across the system as a consideration in alignment with the information that we're presenting tonight.
We would like the trustees to consider other perspectives from feedback received from various stakeholders. Parents would like more information about the Credo. Many, if not all, parents really like that the board has a Credo. When I was talking to, I spoke to many parents on the phone, and all were really supportive and surprised. A lot of them didn't know that we had a Credo. And I had one gentleman say, "You have a Credo? And you're stating responsibilities that you have to parents and to my child? Wow, good for you." It was that kind of, that was common. It was great. And speaking to parents, some parents said, "Yeah, we're familiar with the Credo. I know that it's a plaque on the wall in the schools, but can you send that home? Can we get a copy at home? We'd like more information about the Credo, and what does that look like for my child? What does it translate? How does it translate?" Greater understanding of the purpose and function of the Credo. Although many people suggested that the Credo be shortened, it became clear through interviews and school visits that there needs to be greater understanding and sharing about the purpose and function of the Credo. For example, some comments were that the Credo should include the student responsibilities. So I would hear from people saying, "Well, how come, the Credo states what our responsibilities are, but how come we're not stating what the student responsibilities are?" And that's not the purpose of the Credo. The Credo is about the adults in our system and what our responsibilities are. Has nothing to do with student responsibilities. That's what the agenda is for, and the student handbook that goes home in September. It's very common that teachers go over the handbook that goes over the student responsibilities. So is that important? Absolutely, but not in the Credo. As well, the Credo supports the mission statement. We prepare all students for a successful life. If you want something short to share with people, then give them the board's mission statement. But for those people who want more details about how are you supporting students and preparing them for a successful life, that's where the Credo comes in. It's the details. It's the meat and potatoes. Sorry for my terminology here, but it's the basis that you would go to and the clear expectations of how we're doing it. Communication and collaboration, I sort of already touched on this. Many employees have indicated a desire for continued opportunities to collaborate and discuss a deeper implementation of the Credo in their workplace. Staff would like more opportunities to discuss how to meet student needs effectively. Many staff have said that they have not reflected on the Credo and made connections to their personal workday or looked at how their school's actions connect with the Credo. Now the fun part that I had during my month secondment was to actually go and visit schools. And what I learned is that there's lots and lots of examples of the Credo in action. People are doing great things in their schools. And I think there's in your package, I don't know what appendix
C.
Appendix C, I think there's 24 listed stories of Credo in action that people wrote in. I'll let you look at that. But I would also like to share with you some of the stories that I stumbled upon. It wasn't presented to me as this is a Credo in action story, but I just stumbled upon it. I went to Drummond Public School, and Mark Fritz is the principal there. And so she was giving me a tour of the school, and the custodian popped his head in and said, "Thank you very much, she loved it. It was delicious." And I said to Mark, I go, "What's that about?" And she said, "Oh, it's nothing to go." And I said, "Did you make something?" And she said, "Yeah, my custodian, he's such a great guy. He's wonderful. He does so many wonderful things for the school. His wife just had surgery, and so she made them supper. And she sent it home with him because she's normally the wife is normally the cook in the family, and she sent home supper for the evening, so they just had to warm it up, and it was a no-fuss thing for them." And I thought, wow, that's wow, leadership of caring. I just thought, great example. Rockland District High School, I was there visiting, and it happened to be Valentine's Day, and there were 4 girls who offered me a cupcake. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but I was talking to them, and on their own initiative, they created over 500 cupcakes for everybody in the school because they didn't want to leave anyone out. So it wasn't something that the adults organized, it was student initiated, and I thought, great example of Credo in action. Amherst Corners. They have, in their staff room, they have a Michelangelo wall of all students at risk, pictures taken, and they have a little chart where the teachers are connected with an at-risk student. That's there, and they have chart paper with soup day. So there's custodians and the principal and staff take turns every week. We're talking about staff wellness. It's that kind of activities in schools that create an inviting and warm environment for people to work in. BCI, I was lucky enough to be with Student Senate during my secondment for a visit to get their feedback. And at BCI, there was a Student Senate member who really wanted to start an awareness campaign at her school and on inclusivity and diversity. And so she started up something, and I thought there's just so many wonderful stories out there. There's too numerous to mention, but there's a lot of things happening that people don't know about. And I created a quick slideshow. If we have just 2 minutes long, when I was during my school visits, I would just snap photos, and a lot of people weren't even aware of the great things that link to the Credo. Do we have sound?
If you were falling, then I would catch you. You need a light. I'd find a match, 'cause I
Okay, all right, thank you. Trustees, comments, questions? There are the short list of items to reflect on. We can start with that, work from that. But are there any questions? Or Trustee McDonald?
I don't want to sound negative by any means by saying this, but when I look at our credo, I perhaps it's long too. And when I look at the surveys and when I look at our credo and understanding what a credo is or should be, it's not about a sales pitch, which in my view, if we try to get the credo out to the community, it's a sales pitch. A credo is our statement of beliefs, how we value what we do. It's the character, it's the piece that we do when no one is watching. The sales pitch is executing. So in my view, it's not making sure that the community likes our credo, it's that we're doing what we said we would do. And they like that. That's more important to me than understanding or making sure that the credo is accepted by the community. They can accept it all they want, but if we don't do it, it's no good. If they don't like it and we do it, it's no good. If we do what we say we're going to do and make improvements on that, that's really what the credo should be. It's our marching orders. If the parents in the community want a Bill of Rights for what a parent should be entitled to from having your student or your child attend Upper Canada, that's a different thing. But that, I want to be careful that we owe a certain amount of things to our community, but I think the credo is ours, not the community's.
Trustee McMillan.
Through you, Chair, I tend to agree with you on that. I think that the credo is reflected in our actions. And our actions of every employee in the board, from any position that is employed in our board, must be a reflection of what the credo and what we stand for. And we will only be judged by how we pull off our actions and how everyone believes strongly in what we are all about. It's our why. There's no question about that. And I agree with that. This is ours. And that when you mentioned about parents not knowing about a credo and wanting it, there was part of me that said, they want to see if our actions are measuring up to what we say in our credo. But I do believe that every employee should reflect the credo through their actions, every one of them.
Trustee McRae?
So thank you for that nice segue into the question that I'm going to ask Trustee McMillan. And that has to do with the implementation, which was, I believe, 5, 6, and 7 on that presentation that was given. Is this question asked in a performance review? What did I do today as a teacher to illustrate I'm living the Upper Canada School Board credo?
Director?
I'm going to be candid. Not enough. I believe that the province in their 144 look-fors and so forth have made some of the teacher evaluations so process-oriented. It doesn't go back to what Trustee McMillan said. Are you answering the why in your classroom every day? And I agree totally. This is why we do what we do as we go through. I would say, from my perspective about having introduced this, is that this should then become, now, I believe, that the parents are starting to understand this is the thing that the parents now hit me over the head with. You may remember in our situation in Pakenham, I had a parent quote this to me, saying, if you really believe this, why did you do this? Well, that's fair. I guess that's like a Bible scripture. You take the one that you like the best to support your text, and you miss the other 75 that perhaps don't go the way you want them. I think this is now at the stage where we say, where do we take this to the next level as you go through it? If I may take a bit of a liberty and respond to the question, you take a look at Johnson Johnson, who Gina chose to as an example. As David McDonald said, they don't put you don't read every Tylenol thing that come out, or every hip replacement that you have a Johnson & Johnson hip, and say, is it right there to be followed? But whenever there's a difficult day, they go back and read it to say, oh, we will put our public first no matter what we do, over even profits. And so I think, again, I go, this is about us. It's about, and it's interesting, Stephanie, thank you for what you shared that. It's that it's not about the students. Everything's about the students. This is about how do we deliver as we go through. And I would ask, I guess going forward, I think the implementation would the direction be now that this should be used in every single person's teacher evaluation or performance evaluation? I would say yes. I would say that we're at the stage now that we're being hit over the head by it, which I said, Stephanie may remember back 6 years ago, I said, this will finally be serving as well when parents quote it to tell us how dissatisfied they are with something on a bus or something as they go through. You said this, or type of thing. So we're at the stage, I think, to move this to the next level as we go through. I think it's important for us to understand, and I think it's interesting, we know why we have it.
Trustee Buckland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're in such an era of speed and abruptness. We can't have license plate philosophy, and that's maybe what some people are looking for. I appreciated the visuals by Teacher Reddick, to create a title and then give the example of what might be considered. So what we have here is philosophy, and it is general, and I think we have to keep it that way, as been pointed out. I wanted to look at page 4 specifically, and I was concerned in the last paragraph where we may be moving to...
Page 4 of which of the documents? The review?
I don't know.
Summary?
It's titled Interpretation, VI, section VI.
6.
Or Roman numeral 6. The last paragraph, maybe we tend to do that towards, I think, illogical fallacy where or ad hominem, where you write off, well, he said he had to do it, and so we can't really put much weight on that suggestion. We could also say that about those who agreed with it. Well, I had to do it, and so I'd be careful about that part, unless there's more specific explanation on why we should not really value those who offered suggestions.
Thank you, Trustee Buckland. Any other comments? Okay, well, I'm just going to start you then through the list because I'd like at the end to be able to give them some direction. Let's talk about the subject of the length. And they're shorter. Concise is a different word, right? Like that doesn't necessarily mean it's shorter. It just means check it for the fact that there's no, précis the text rather than giving them a direction that it has to be shorter. The danger in sending a directive as simple as make it shorter is, are we prepared to do away with some of the things in it? And it's interesting that you make it shorter and then you read some of the other ideas, easier to read. Well, that probably means unpacking some of the words in there and making it longer if you're going to make it simpler. I don't often see text become simpler by reducing the words. Well, that can happen too. So what do we want to do about the length? Are we less concerned about the length and just want to make sure that it reflects what we believe? Or do we really see that we want to see it halved or quartered or... Trustee Karkner?
I'm suggesting we leave the length more or less alone and maybe clean up some of the words that are in it and make it more pertinent to today. There were suggestions about the environment. Perhaps we should say more about that. the section about our employees, you know, there are suggestions throughout some of the things that were given to us in these documents. You know, wellness, did we touch on wellness for our staff? There are certain things that are, we've moved along in our development as a board since this credo came out, and I think we have to address those in the wording that's in there. I don't have a problem with the length. I mean, you could just have one sentence and it wouldn't mean anything.
Okay, so just focus on the length part of Trustee Karkner's comment. Then length is fine, but make sure it's concise. That it is, there's no extra verbiage, but ensure that it's understandable. Okay, I'm going to get to the relevant piece because I think that's a little different. Okay, so do we agree to that then? That's the instruction on the length. So check for it being concise and readable, but we're not giving you an instruction to reduce the words by 20% or something. Okay, now you, Trustee Karkner and Trustee McDonald picked up on relevance, modern, make sure it's modern. Help me understand what you mean by that. Trustee McDonald?
Well, whenever I mean, if we look at it, are we making statements for the sake of making statements? So, you know, is it something that is it a statement about how we want to guide ourselves, guide our staff? Or is it a statement just indicating, you know, we believe in the environment? You know, that's not relevant from a credo standpoint. It's relevant from what we do. I would understand or agree to that, but I'm not certain that how we word things in here, and that may deal with some of the length issues though, is that if we look at the relevance to what we want to achieve. I guess the question we have to ask is, what do we want to achieve? Like, what do we want from an organization to be when we read this credo? We can make a lot of statements, and we can create a book, but at the end of the day, you know, it comes back to that guiding principle of the actions we do when no one is looking. I mean, that's the guiding principle. That's the measurement more so than the guiding principle. It's about the character, right? It's about how we do things.
Trustee Karkner, do you want to expand on that? Just before you do, we'll finish this item and then we'll discuss whether we want to continue on with the last item or move it to another meeting. But right now, as long as we're discussing this item, we don't need a motion to continue. Trustee Karkner?
I think Trustee McDonald has hit on it. I'm just looking at the second paragraph again, and it says that we make decisions based on data. We make data-based decisions, and I hope that's not the only thing we use to make decisions as a board. Now, perhaps as a senior staff, yes, maybe they do, but data isn't the answer to everything. I don't know. Yes, we collect data, and no offense, Mr. Dawes. I think we have other ways of making decisions other than using data that's presented. It's helpful in decision making. I don't think it's final. That needs to be broadened somewhat, a little bit.
Okay, so let's think about the instruction that we're giving staff here. So what is it that we're asking them to go and do? We're asking them to is it just those 2 points? You're talking about the environment, you're talking about...
I just use that as an example.
Right.
I think in general, we just need to make sure that it is relevant to that. And if we have an open-ended statement, which is basically, it's a mandated issue sometimes, right? We talk about offering pathways for our students in one of the pieces as well.
Okay, so I like that. I like that. So watch the open-ended statements. That we're, you know, ensure that the open-ended statements are clear is probably what we're looking at. Relevant. Trustee Karkner?
I think after Stephanie and Phil have gone through this exercise, they have an idea in their heads as to what it should look like based on the recommendations that have come from their different sources. I'd like to see what they come back with based on the information that they have received.
Okay, now, I'm gonna
Just
give you
share
the
with us and make a
right.
decision
I'm
whether
gonna
it's
give you the caution in that
Yeah.
that often then becomes kind of removes us from it. So we have to be careful what we ask for.
I think they've heard what we're feeling.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but we need. I think we're not done quite yet giving them feedback. That would be my read on it. Anybody else want to throw something in here? Yep. Trustee McCray.
Yes, through you, Chair. I would like to see something about, because I think this has to do with relevancy, inclusivity, because I think our student population is very different. I think they are very open now about different issues, and sexuality would be an example. So I think inclusivity is very relevant. And also, there was a mention of mental health, and we always hear the Ontario Public School Board talking about the whole student. So I'm just wondering if there's some way that we can encompass that in this. I know that might fall under we are responsible to our students. I just would like them to look at that.
Okay. Anybody object or have concerns about that? Trustee McDonald?
And it's you know, respectfully, inclusivity is and I don't have the legislative details, but it's a requirement now for boards of education to ensure that we have inclusivity, well, whatever, you know what I mean, within how we operate. So by putting it in their credo, we're basically re-emphasizing what the ministry says we have to do. And I'm not certain that that's, I think the credo is a step above, right? There's the responsibilities of a board, and then there's what we want to do to emphasize and augment what our responsibilities are. And that's where we need to make sure that the credo is, and not just restating what we're mandated to do or what the requirements are. And that's, you know, I don't disagree that they're important, I just don't know that they belong in the credo.
Director?
At the risk of arguing, in this particular one, I agree that it has to be better than what the ministry's asking. This has to be, as Trustee McMillan said, this is our why. But I think in this particular 21st century that we're in, and we're 12 years in, and looking at the issues facing our families and our students, I think that we have to I think that Trustee McRae has brought up an issue that of leadership. I take a look at the 3 suicides in the last 5 years in our board, and 2 of them had to deal with the issues of kids who felt that they were almost abandoned by everyone, and that the teachers, they felt their moms and dads had gone, that their church had sort of left them, and different things of this nature. And what I think the credo has to say, you have to, David, me, you have to reach out to kids like that and make sure they see themselves in the board, because what I've always loved about this, it's so student-centric. It tells all the adults how they're supposed to treat the kids. And I think somehow in here, because I know we talk with the mental and emotional needs of our at the board. We have to look at our staff's emotional and mental needs, because we want well people serving kids. But I don't think we have really nailed that one item down, so that a child who is at risk to themselves or others, how do we see serving them? And I'm not sure, probably no one's read this as much as I have. I think there's an opening there that has to be, because there's some people who I think, David, I know you're not like that at all, who don't see this part of a job. I think part of our job is to make sure that agenda item that you have talked about should be there. I don't see it there yet. I'm not sure about the wording. I'm not sure how to get, because I know where you're at, David. This is why. So, but I think that there's some people not being served most effectively yet, because they were allowed to hide behind perhaps some innuendo and suspicion. And so, from my perspective, it's only my perspective, I think it's something that we should think about. And maybe, I understood what Carol was coming from, the risk chair of speaking too much here, is I think you're saying they've heard this stuff and now listen here, come back with something that makes sense here, that is perhaps captured the spirit of this board. And one of the things I love about this board is the way that we've reached out to every marginalized group. They all belong in our board, everyone. And what I love about all means all. So.
Go ahead, Trustee McDonald.
To be argumentative, you've said it.
Yeah.
All means all. To single out students at risk or emphasize mental health, we're watering down all means all. I think we need to make sure that what we've said, all means all, and hold our people accountable. That all means all, regardless of it's a student at risk, regardless of anything. We've said it. It's a pretty powerful statement, and that's, we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of that. I mean, mental health awareness is an important piece in our communities. I understand that, but we made a statement that regardless, every child will be treated the same way. Every student will be ensured that we've made sure that we've crossed every line that we could to make sure we help every student, and we don't emphasize any tags.
Letting anybody off the hook, though.
I have no problem if that's the case. If we want to make sure that we don't let anybody off the hook, but if we try to put an emphasis on any one particular area, then all doesn't mean all.
Trustee Buckland?
Thank you. It's almost in paragraph 2, I would think. I would suggest, I think there is a little bit missing there, and what I would suggest is that we will honor students' abilities and treat each student as a unique individual. And so then you have the totality and also the individuality in focus, I think. A suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Trustee McAllister, Trustee Swan?
I'd like to see it expanded upon through you, Chair, a bit more. And not just students, our staff as well, because I think inclusivity goes outside of students, it also goes to our staff too.
Trustee Richards, anything? Trustee McCray?
Well, I'm just trying to look at what we have for wording there right now, through the chair. And, what's wrong with putting all means all in there?
Powerful.
Okay, is there anything else? Yep, Trustee Carter?
I just noticed that in paragraph 2, we've used, referred to agencies in our communities, and we've done the same in the 4th paragraph, so maybe that needs to be cleaned up a little bit as well. You know, the context may be a bit different, but I don't think it is. We've used, including our communities, twice.
Okay.
And all does mean all, so why can't we say, we believe our first responsibility is to all of our students, not just ours.
Trustee Buckland?
Okay, I want a couple of things on the we will strive to promote environmental. I would suggest enhance environmental. We're not starting at zero awareness, so we are enhancing it. And perhaps, it's a tautology to say we realize we only have one world. I think my 4-year-old realizes that. So I wonder if that is reducing the sense of...
Is this news, Trustee Buckland? Oh, your 4-year-old grandson. Got it?
4-year-old son.
This is world shaking. If you didn't know.
You were just testing to see which one of us were still awake. Go ahead, Trustee Howe.
Just to reinforce what Trustee Buckland was saying, Mrs. Retta came to our Student Senate meeting and presented this to all our Student Senators, and one of the things that came up the most with them was the part about the environment. And I mean, that's one of the things that's most important to our students, So I agree with him that maybe that paragraph about the environment should be a little more in depth.
We're a thinking team.
I think that'll be
The
right.
youngest and the
Let it go.
not youngest.
I don't think we need to worry about it. I think they got it down at the other end. Okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting it a shot, so it's fine.
Okay. Anything else?
Can I just draw one thing, you know, look how close
10
this is.
seconds.
That means I get the shot back.
Yeah, no, this is for Trustee McAllister.
What's this?
I actually thought that you would raise David's points, because one of the issues, because I do concur with David, that one of the concerns I have had with all of my involvement in digging into the issues around mental health, whether you had something specifically written, you know, we honor those type of things. And I just want to make sure, John, you're comfortable, because I know where we're going. I think we really understand that mental health and the whole aspect of a well person in front of kids is critical. And I'm not sure if there's a bang there, because I think it's critical in this day and age to become more sensitive and get that particular issue out of the closet and into the mainstream, that would recognize that we're, you know, things we didn't talk about 20 years ago, and now we actually say what we mean and so forth. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I thought you might have something to say, but there should be a bit of punch into that one.
I'm really not prepared to comment on it at this time.
I will.
Okay.
Trustee McDonald.
David, I disagree. I think it doesn't belong in the credo. It's an important piece. You go out and you do it, and you emphasize it, and you hammer it home in our communities. But the fact that we embrace every person is the important aspect. I want to make sure that we differentiate between that. Every person, mental health awareness isn't a credo piece, it's our action. It's going out into the community. It's serving the needs of every student. It's making sure that awareness piece is front and center. And that's the actions that we do as a result of the credo, not the statement.
Okay, so you heard what you need to hear. Is there anything that you wish clarification or that we have left off?
No, I thank the team for providing us some very valuable information, and work with that.
When should we hear back from you? Would it be next committee of the whole, or?
I think this is going to take a bit of time. I think you're going to need the summer to write that. As
We
Ian,
need a draft, though. We
as
need a
Ian,
draft.
as Ian knows, we had 30 people at staff. 30 people writing this. And it took them 18 months. I think that we're going to have to give us sufficient time. That a draft would come back probably after we give you the time. Would September 30th be a good time?
I'll look to my partner.
September
Okay with
30th?
that? Yeah.
Next September?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're really that.
Yes.
I'm hearing yes. That would be fine.
That'd be fine.
Well, I think that it should come back sooner than that if it can. I mean, there's no sense
Do you
in.
want a draft to come back?
Yeah. No, a draft definitely has to come back.
Yeah.
All right, you work, keep Lisa informed, and as soon as you can, by September, no later than September. Okay. All right. We have another item left. We're going to need a motion to extend if we want to entertain it. How much time, John, do you think we're going to need? I don't want to rush it. I want to make sure we have enough time. It's not imperative we deal with it today. What's your feeling?
Well, I can say what I need to say in about 2 minutes.
Yeah? All right, well then, motion to extend?
I have two things that I was going to say in regards to.
10:17? Oh, okay.
So do we want to do it now, or do we want to wait? Wait? Okay, well then I won't bother looking for a motion to extend. We still have a private session to go back into, so we still have that. Motion to adjourn. Trustee McMillan?
Yes.
Trustee Swan? All in favor? Opposed? That carries.